Radio check. This is Captain Nightwhisper. So, you want to know the truth? Not just fragments, but the whole ugly picture. Tonight I am opening the Black Archives. I have compiled the most dangerous missions we have ever survived, from the deep underground labs to the frozen hell of Antarctica. Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and check your ammo. It's going to be a long night. Let's begin.
They call Antarctica the quietest place on Earth. They tell you it's a continent of peace, of science, a pristine white canvas where nations put aside their differences to study the climate, the ice, the history of our planet. That is a lie. The silence down here isn't peaceful, it's heavy. It presses against your eardrums like the crushing depth of the ocean. It's a silence that is waiting, watching. My name is Miller. For 20 years, I worked private security for mining operations in places you don't want to visit. The Congo, Siberia, the Darien Gap. I thought I had seen the worst nature could throw at a man. But I was wrong. 2 years ago, I was contracted by a joint task force, Russian and American private interests, to oversee security at a black site research station known as Outpost 9. It sat directly above Lake Vostok, a subglacial body of water buried under 4 kilometers of ancient ice. We weren't there to study the climate. We were there to drill. The geological scans had picked up something anomalous near the bedrock, a pocket of liquid that shouldn't have been liquid. We went down to retrieve a sample. We thought we were drilling into history. Instead, we drilled into a prison cell. This is the recording of what happened during the final 72 hours of Outpost 9. If you are listening to this, the quarantine has failed, and you need to burn this tape. To understand what happened, you have to understand the isolation. Outpost 9 wasn't like McMurdo or Vostok Station. Those places are cities compared to where we were. We were 300 miles from the nearest human soul, perched on a plateau of ice that shifted and groaned under our feet like a sleeping giant. The temperature outside averaged 60 degrees below zero. At that temperature, machinery breaks, fuel turns to gel, and exposed skin dies in seconds. But inside the HAB module, it was always a humid, sweating 70 degrees, smelling of recycled air, instant coffee, and unwashed bodies. There were 12 of us, 6 scientists, 4 engineers, and 2 security personnel, myself and a kid named Sarah. Our job was simple: keep the peace, keep the scientists from killing each other, and ensure that whatever we pulled up didn't leave the room without authorization. The centerpiece of the station was the rig. It was a monstrosity of steel and hydraulics, drilled directly through the floor of the main hangar. For 3 weeks, that drill had been screaming, a never-ending high-pitched whine that vibrated through your boots, through the floor, and eventually into your teeth. You couldn't sleep without hearing it. You couldn't eat without feeling it. It became the heartbeat of the station. On the morning of the incident, I was in the command center, watching the monitors with Dr. Aris, the project lead. Aris was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with red, and he had a nervous tick of tapping his pen against his clipboard. "Depth," Aris barked into the intercom. The voice of Petrov, the chief engineer, crackled back. 3,980 meters. We are approaching the target zone, Doctor. The ice density is changing. It is getting softer. "Keep the pressure steady," Aris ordered, leaning closer to the screens. "Do not breach the pocket too fast. If we crack the seal violently, we lose the pressure differential." I looked at the telemetry data on the screen. The drill bit was nearly 4 kilometers down. Think about that. 4 kilometers of solid ice pressing down on a metal tube no wider than a dinner plate. The pressure readings were off the charts. It was enough to crush a submarine like a soda can. "Doctor," I said, stepping forward. "The sensors on the outer casing are spiking. Vibration is increasing. Maybe we should throttle back. If that bit snaps down there, we're done." Aris didn't even look at me. "We are not throttling back, Miller. We are 72 hours behind schedule. The window of opportunity is closing. The satellite scans show the anomaly is shifting. If we don't tag it now, we might miss it entirely." Anomaly? I asked. This was new. I thought we were drilling for water samples, ancient bacteria. Aris finally turned to me. His smile was thin, devoid of humor. You are here to shoot polar bears if they get lost, Miller. Leave the science to us. Just know that what is down there, it has been isolated from the rest of the biosphere for 15 million years. It is pure, untouched. I didn't like the way he said pure. Suddenly, the rig groaned. It was a sound I had never heard before, a deep metallic screech that sounded like the station itself was being torn in half. The lights in the command center flickered. The coffee cup on the console danced toward the edge. "Petrov, report!" Aris yelled. "We hit a cavity!" Petrov's voice was frantic, shouting over the roar of the machinery. "The drill dropped! 3 meters! Free fall! We are through the ice shelf! We are in the liquid!" "Stabilize!" Aris screamed, his eyes wide with a mix of terror and ecstasy. "Engage the locking clamps! Seal the borehole! Don't let the pressure blow back!" The floor beneath us bucked. I grabbed the railing to keep from falling. The screaming of the drill changed pitch, winding down from a high whine to a low, churning grind. Then, silence. The sudden lack of noise was deafening. My ears were ringing. For a moment, nobody moved. We just stared at the depth gauge. 4,002 meters. "Status?" Aris whispered. Petrov's voice came back, breathless. "We are stable. The seal is holding. The probe is in the water, or whatever liquid this is. Sensors are reading temperature, -3 degrees. Salinity is high. Oxygen content is 0. "Start the pump," Aris said. His hands were shaking. "Bring up the sample." I walked over to the reinforced glass window that looked down into the drilling bay. The engineers were moving around the rig like ants, checking valves and pressure lines. They looked terrified. "Miller," Aris said, his voice low. "I want full lockdown. No one enters or leaves the drilling bay without a hazmat suit. Level 4 protocols." "Doctor," I said, "Level 4 is for bioweapons. We're drilling for water." "Just do it," he snapped. I keyed my radio. "Sarah, lock down the bay doors. Initiate decontamination cycle. We're bringing something up." I watched as the massive hydraulic winch began to turn, pulling the miles of cable back up from the abyss. It would take hours to bring the sample container to the surface. Hours of waiting. Hours of listening to the wind howl outside, sounding more and more like voices screaming to be let in. I went down to the bay to oversee the security. The air down there felt different. It was colder, despite the heaters. There was a smell, faint, but distinct. It smelled like ozone and old copper, like a thunderstorm trapped in a bottle. As the winch groaned, pulling the final segment of the drill string into the chamber, I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach, a primal instinct that I had ignored for the paycheck. We shouldn't have opened that door. Some doors are locked for a reason, but curiosity is a disease, and we were all terminal. The sample was about to arrive, and God help us, we were ready to welcome it. The extraction process took 4 hours. 4 hours of watching the cable winch drum turn, layer by layer, pulling our prize from the crushing dark. The mood in the drilling bay was brittle. No one was joking. No one was talking about what they'd do with the bonus money. The engineers, Petrov, and a young guy named Jensen stood by the borehole with thermal blankets and containment drums, looking like priests waiting for a coffin. "Casing breach in 10 meters, Petrov announced, his voice tinny through the comms loop. "Prepare the airlock. Sarah, Miller, weapons tight. If the pressure seal blows, we're going to have a lot of flying debris." I gripped my MP5. It felt ridiculous holding a submachine gun against a hole in the ground. What was I going to shoot? The ice? But Aris had insisted on full security protocols. He was pacing back and forth, rubbing his hands together. He wasn't scared. He was hungry. He looked like an addict waiting for a fix. Clank. The winch stopped. The massive titanium cylinder, 3 meters long and covered in frost, hung suspended over the open borehole. Steam hissed from the joints where the warm air of the bay hit the super-cooled metal of the canister. "Seal the hole!" Aris shouted. "Secure the sample!" Petrov and Jensen moved in, engaging the magnetic clamps. They lowered the cylinder onto a heavy-duty trolley. It radiated cold. I could feel it from 10 feet away, a sharp, biting chill that cut right through my thermal fatigues. It wasn't just temperature. It felt like the air around the cylinder was dying. "To the lab, now," Aris ordered. We escorted the trolley through the decontamination corridors. The lights flickered as we passed. The station's generator was acting up again. Or maybe it was just the magnetic field of the core interfering with the electrical grid. Inside the biolab, the atmosphere was sterile white. It was a stark contrast to the grime of the drill bay. This was Aris's kingdom. We helped load the cylinder into the primary containment chamber, a sealed glass box with glove ports and robotic manipulator arms. "Initiating opening sequence," Aris said, his face pressed against the glass. The automated latches on the cylinder clicked open. Hiss, a plume of pressurized gas escaped. Nitrogen and argon used to preserve the sample. The metal casing split down the middle and fell away. I don't know what I expected. A tube of clear blue ice? Maybe some ancient sediment, brown and rocky? What lay on the tray was void. It was a cylinder of ice, yes, but it was black. Not dark gray, not muddy. It was absolute, Vanta black. It seemed to absorb the harsh fluorescent lights of the laboratory. It didn't reflect anything. It was like looking into a hole in the fabric of reality, and it wasn't solid. "Look at the structure," Dr. Sobek, the team's biologist, whispered. She sounded horrified. It's fractal." I stepped closer, keeping my hand on my weapon. Inside the black ice, there were veins, thin, spiderweb fractures of a lighter, violet hue that seemed to pulse very faintly. It looked like a nervous system frozen in time. "It's beautiful," Aris murmured. "It's wrong," I said. "Ice doesn't look like that, Doctor. That's not water." "It is water," Aris corrected, checking the spectrometer readings on his tablet. H2O, but the molecular bond, it's hexagonal, but twisted. The hydrogen atoms are aligned in a way I've never seen. It's hyperdense. "Is it safe?" Sarah asked from the door. She looked pale. "It's dead, Sarah," Aris scoffed. "It's been at 300 atmospheres of pressure and minus 20 degrees for 15 million years. Nothing survives that." He reached into the glove ports. His hands, encased in thick rubber, hovered over the black core. He grabbed a scalpel tool. "Taking the first sample for microscopy," he announced. He touched the black ice. At the moment of contact, a sound resonated through the room, a low-frequency thrum that we felt in our chests more than we heard. The lights in the lab surged, brighter, then dimmer. "Did you feel that?" I asked, stepping back. "Static discharge," Aris dismissed it, scraping a flake of the black substance onto a slide. "Just static." But I saw it, just for a microsecond. Where the scalpel had touched the core, the black veins didn't just break. They recoiled. They pulled back like a living thing avoiding a needle. "Aris," I said, my voice warning. "Don't touch it again." We spent the next 6 hours in that lab. I instituted a rotation for security. Sarah took the door. I watched the scientists. I didn't trust Aris, and I certainly didn't trust that black rock on the table. They raised the temperature in the containment chamber slowly. -10 degrees, -5, 0. Normal ice would be melting by now. It would be a puddle of water. But the Vostok core didn't melt. It sweated. Thick, viscous droplets of black sludge began to bead on the surface of the cylinder. They didn't run down the sides. They pooled together, merging, coagulating. Dr. Sobek was glued to the electron microscope. "Aris, look at this," she called out. Her voice was trembling. "The cellular structure, it's waking up." "Bacteria?" Aris asked, looking over her shoulder. "No," Sobek said. "It's not bacteria. It's not a virus. It doesn't have a cell wall. It's mimetic." "English, Doctor," I interrupted from the corner. Sobek turned to me. She looked terrified. "It doesn't have its own DNA, Miller. It's a blank slate. Whatever it touches, it becomes. It copies the molecular structure of its environment. Right now, it's copying the silica of the glass slide. So it's a chameleon, I said. No, she shook her head. A chameleon changes color to hide. This changes structure to consume. Suddenly, a loud crack came from the containment unit. We all spun around. The black cylinder had split open. The heat had finally done its work. The core had collapsed into a pile of that black, oily sludge. It sat in the glass box, a shimmering puddle of darkness, but it wasn't sitting still. "Is the ventilation on?" Jensen asked. "The liquid is moving." He was right. The puddle was rippling, but there was no fan in the box. The air was still. The sludge was moving against gravity. It was slowly, inch by inch, climbing the glass walls of the containment unit. It was seeking the heat source, the internal lights of the box. "Kill the power to the box!" I yelled. "Freeze it down!" "No!" Aris shouted, blocking the control panel. "Look at it! It's reacting to thermal stimuli. It's intelligent behavior." "It's trying to get out, you idiot!" I shoved Aris aside and slammed my hand on the emergency cooling override. The liquid nitrogen jets hissed, blasting the chamber with freezing mist. The black sludge instantly slowed. It stopped climbing. It hardened, turning back into a brittle, glossy shell on the side of the glass. The room was silent, save for Aris's heavy breathing. "You ruined the experiment," Aris spat at me. "I saved your life," I retorted. "That thing was looking for a way out." "It's just chemical reactions," Aris insisted, though he looked less sure now. "Heat causes expansion." "It wasn't expanding, Doctor," Sarah said from the doorway. Her weapon was raised, pointing at the glass box. "It was hunting." I walked up to the glass. The black frost covered the inside, obscuring the view, but I could see a shape in the center. It had reformed. It wasn't a cylinder anymore. It had taken a shape that looked disturbingly like a human hand, pressing against the glass from the inside. And then the intercom buzzed. It was Petrov, down in the engineering deck. "Command, this is engineering," Petrov said. His voice was odd, flat, monotone. "We have a problem with the secondary heater. I need assistance." "Copy, Petrov," I replied. "What kind of problem?" "There is leakage," Petrov said. "Black water. It came from the pipes. It is warm." My blood ran cold. The sample in the lab was contained, but the drill string was still connected to the void below. "Miller," Sobek whispered, looking at the microscope screen again. "The sample I took, it's gone." "What do you mean gone?" "The slide is empty," she said. "It absorbed the glass. It ate the slide." I looked at her gloved hands. There was a tiny microscopic tear in the rubber of her left index finger. A small, black smudge, no bigger than a pinhead, was on her skin. She followed my gaze. She saw the black spot. She didn't scream. She just looked at me, and her eyes began to fill with black tears. "Miller," she whispered. "It's loud. It's so loud in my head." "Miller," Dr. Sobek said again. But this time, her voice didn't tremble. It didn't sound like a terrified woman anymore. It sounded layered, like two people speaking at the exact same time, slightly out of sync. The black spot on her finger wasn't a spot anymore. It was a vine. I watched in horror as a thick black vein shot up her wrist, disappearing under the sleeve of her lab coat. Her skin paled instantly, turning the color of gray ash. "Step away from her!" I shouted, leveling my MP5 at her chest. "Aris, get back!" "Don't shoot!" Aris screamed, throwing himself in front of her. "She's in shock. It's a chemical reaction." "It's not chemical, you fool!" I yelled. "Look at her eyes!" Sobek looked up. The whites of her eyes were gone. They were entirely black, Vanta black, like the core. But she wasn't screaming. She wasn't fighting it. She was smiling. A calm, serene smile that didn't reach those dead eyes. "We are awake," she said. Not I. We. Then, her body glitched. There is no other way to describe it. Her shoulder joint popped with a wet crack and rotated backward, an angle impossible for a human. Her jaw unhinged, dropping 3 inches too low. "Help me!" The voice changed. It was Petrov's voice coming out of Sobek's mouth. Then it shifted again. It was my voice. "Miller, don't shoot! Help me!" It was cycling through the sounds it had heard, testing them like a radio tuner finding a frequency. "Move, Aris!" I kicked the scientist aside and squeezed the trigger. Pop, pop, pop. 3 rounds to the chest. Sobek didn't fall. The impact pushed her back against the lab counter, shattering beakers. Blood didn't spray. Instead, a thick black tar oozed from the bullet holes. The substance moved, knitting the flesh back together instantly. The bullets were pushed out of her body, clattering onto the floor like discarded coins. It lunged. It wasn't a run, it was a fluid motion, like water flowing uphill. She cleared the distance between us in a blur. I felt a hand, cold as ice and hard as iron, grip my throat. I was lifted off my feet. I looked into her face. The skin was rippling, reshaping itself. For a second, I saw my own face looking back at me from her skull. "Inefficient form," the thing whispered with Sobek's mouth. "Too fragile." Blam! A shotgun blast roared from the doorway. Sarah. The shot took Sobek's arm off at the elbow. The grip on my throat broke, and I fell to the floor, gasping for air. The severed arm on the floor didn't die. It started crawling towards the main body. "Out! Move! Now!" Sarah screamed, pumping another shell into the chamber. I grabbed Aris by the collar of his coat and dragged him towards the door. Sobek, or the thing wearing her skin, was shrieking now. It wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of grinding metal, the sound of the drill, the sound of the wind. We slammed the heavy blast door of the biolab shut and spun the locking wheel. Thud, thud, thud. Something massive slammed against the steel from the inside. The metal buckled slightly. "Seal it!" I wheezed, my throat burning. "Override the lock!" Sarah smashed the keypad with the butt of her shotgun. Sparks flew. The door was dead. We stood in the corridor, panting. The red emergency lights were strobing now. The alarm was deafening. "What was that?" Aris whispered, sliding down the wall. He was shaking violently. That wasn't biology. "It's a mimic," Sarah said, her eyes wide. "It learns, it repairs, and it's fast." "Petrov," I said, remembering the call. "Petrov is down in engineering. If that thing is in the pipes, he's already gone." As if on cue, the intercom crackled. "Command, this is Petrov," the voice said. It was calm, too calm. "Why are the alarms on? Is there a fire? Please, open the blast doors. It is cold down here." I looked at Sarah. She shook her head slowly. "Petrov," I said into my radio, staring at the locked door of the lab where the banging had stopped. "What is your wife's name?" Silence. Then a low, wet chuckle came over the speaker. "We do not have a wife," the voice said, "but we have her memories. She tasted sweet." The radio cut to static. We retreated to the command center. It was the only room with independent life support and reinforced bulkheads. There were only 4 of us left: me, Sarah, Aris, and Jensen, the young engineer who had been lucky enough to be in the mess hall when hell broke loose. Jensen was crying. He was curled up under a console, clutching a wrench. "We have to call for evac," Aris said, frantically typing on the comm station. "We need a bird in the air now." "Stop!" I grabbed his hand. "Think, Doctor. If we call a helicopter, and one of those things gets on board, we bring this to the mainland. We bring this to civilization." "I don't care!" Aris screamed. "I want to live!" "Sit down!" I shoved him into a chair. "Nobody leaves until we know who is who." The station groaned. The wind outside had picked up to hurricane force, a whiteout storm. Even if we wanted to leave, nothing could fly in this weather. We were trapped in a tin can with a monster that could look like a friend. "The ventilation," Sarah whispered, looking up at the grate in the ceiling. "The lab, it's connected to the main vents." I shone my flashlight up into the duct. Nothing but darkness and dust. "It can liquefy," I said. "We saw it. It can turn into slime and move through the pipes." "We need to cut the heat," I realized. "The cold slows it down. In the lab, the nitrogen stopped it. It feeds on thermal energy." "If we cut the heat," Jensen stammered, "we'll freeze to death in 3 hours." "Better than being eaten," Sarah muttered. Suddenly, the lights in the command center died. We were plunged into total darkness. "Backup power!" I yelled. "Get the emergency generator!" But the generator didn't kick in. In the dark, I heard breathing. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Sarah's. It was a wet, rattling breath, coming from the corner of the room where the ventilation shaft was. Drip, drip, drip. Something viscous was dripping onto the floor. "Flashlights!" I ordered. 3 beams of light cut through the dark. We swept the room. There, hanging from the ceiling vent like a spider, was a mass of black slime. It was dripping down, forming a shape on the floor. It rose up. It took a form. It looked like me. It was wearing my face. It was wearing my uniform. It was even holding a shape that looked like my gun. "Miller?" Jensen asked, looking from me to the thing. He was confused. The panic had broken his mind. "Which one is you?" The thing smiled. My smile. "I am Miller," it said, and it sounded exactly like me. Perfect pitch. Perfect cadence. "No," I said, raising my weapon. "You're just a recording." "We are the future," the thing said. "You are just meat. Warm meat." It stepped forward. I saw its skin ripple. Underneath the camouflage of my face, thousands of black tendrils were writhing. "Jensen, get back!" Sarah yelled. But Jensen didn't move. He walked towards the thing. "Miller, you're going to get us out, right?" "Yes," the thing said, opening its arms. "Come here, Jensen. It is warm inside." "Don't!" I screamed. But it was too late. Jensen touched the thing's hand. Instantly, the mimicry dropped. The Miller shape exploded into a mess of black spikes. They impaled Jensen through the chest, the neck, the eyes. He didn't even have time to scream. The black mass engulfed him, pulling him into itself, adding his biomass to its own. "Fire!" I roared. We opened up. In the confined space, the noise was deafening, but we weren't fighting a man. We were fighting a shape-shifting cancer that occupied the whole room. "The door! To the generator room!" Aris yelled, unlocking the rear bulkhead. We scrambled through, leaving Jensen to be digested by the darkness. We slammed the door and welded it shut with a thermal cutter. We were safe for the moment, but we were in the unheated section of the station. The temperature here was already dropping past 0. I looked at Sarah. I looked at Aris. "Check your skin," I said, panting, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Check for cuts. Check for black spots." Because I knew the truth now. It didn't just kill you. It replaced you. And the worst part, I wasn't 100% sure that I hadn't been touched in the chaos. We were huddled in the maintenance bay. The temperature inside had dropped to -40. My eyelashes were freezing together every time I blinked. Aris was in the corner, wrapped in 3 thermal blankets, rocking back and forth. He was muttering equations. He was trying to calculate a way out, but there was no math that could solve this. We can reroute the coolant," Aris stammered, his lips blue. If we flush the system, maybe we can get enough heat to the comms array." "No," I said. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Hypothermia was setting in, the warm, fuzzy stage where you just want to sleep. If we turn the heat on, it wakes up. Sarah was sitting next to the heavy blast door. She had her shotgun across her lap, but her fingers were too frozen to pull the trigger. "It's quiet," she whispered. She was right. The banging on the other side of the door had stopped. The scratching noises in the vents had ceased. The cold was doing its job. It was putting the monster back to sleep. "We have to finish it," I said, forcing myself to stand up. My legs felt like blocks of wood. "We have to kill the generator, completely. Make this station a tomb." "You're crazy!" Aris tried to stand up, stumbling. "You're killing us! I have a family! I have a Nobel Prize waiting for me! You have a parasite waiting for you!" I yelled, shoving him back. "Look at the door, Aris! Look!" Under the crack of the blast door, a thin tendril of black slime had seeped through before freezing solid. It looked like a black icicle. It had stopped inches from our boots. "If that thing gets out," I said, pointing at the frozen sludge, If a rescue team finds a warm station with that thing inside, it reaches the ocean. It reaches the biomass of the planet. It mimics everything. The fish, the birds, the people. Game over. I limped over to the main breaker panel. It was labeled Total System Shutdown. Don't, Aris pleaded, tears freezing on his cheeks. Please, I don't want to die in the dark. We're not dying in the dark, Doc, Sarah said softly. She clicked on a chemical flare. It hissed, casting a stark red light over the frozen room. We're just going to sleep. I looked at Sarah. She nodded. I grabbed the lever. It was cold enough to burn my skin. For the record, I said to the tape recorder in my pocket, my name is Jack Miller, Security Chief. Outpost 9 remains under quarantine, indefinitely. I pulled the lever. Clunk. The last hum of the generator died. The emergency lights faded. The only light left was Sarah's red flare. The silence returned. The absolute crushing silence of Antarctica. We sat down together against the far wall. Aris was weeping softly until the cold took his energy. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. Miller? She whispered. Yeah? Do you think it hurts? Freezing? No, I lied. It's like falling asleep in the snow. It's peaceful. We sat there as the frost began to creep up our legs. I watched the red flare sputtering on the floor. The shadows danced. For a second, I thought I saw the black icicle under the door move. Just a twitch. But it was too cold now, even for that. My eyes felt heavy. The cold wasn't biting anymore. It felt like a heavy blanket. Good night, Sarah, I whispered. She didn't answer. I closed my eyes, and I listened to the wind. Location, Outpost 9, Antarctica. Time, 6 months after the incident. Unit, Recovery Team. Delta. Command, this is Delta Lead. We have breached the facility, entering the maintenance sector. The lights of our tactical flashlights cut through the gloom. The station is a freezer. The walls are covered in 2 inches of ice. We found them in the generator room, 3 bodies, frozen solid. Identities confirmed, my second in command says, checking the tags. Dr. Aris, Security Officer Sarah Vance, and Chief Miller. They look peaceful, like statues carved out of ice. Miller is holding a tape recorder in his frozen hand. Bag them, I order. Carefully, don't break anything. Sir, a Marine calls out from the blast door. You need to see this. I walk over to the door they welded shut. Underneath the crack, there is a black stain. It looks like oil, but as I shine my light on it, the light doesn't reflect. It gets absorbed. What is that? The Marine asks. I look closer. The black stain is frozen, but deep inside it, trapped in the ice, I can see shapes, tiny microscopic veins. Radiation check? I ask. Normal, sir, but thermal scans are weird. That spot. It's slightly warmer than the surrounding ice, like 0.1 degrees warmer. It's generating its own heat. It's trying to thaw itself out, even after 6 months at minus 60 degrees. Back away, I order, unholstering my flare gun. Do not touch the black ice. I take Miller's tape recorder. I press play. The battery is dead, but we'll recover the data. I look around the station. This wasn't a research facility. It was a containment breach. And these 3 people, they didn't die from an accident. They executed themselves to keep the lid on the jar. Command, I say into my radio. Mark this site as a biohazard level 5. Do not recover the bodies. Do not recover the samples. Repeat, Delta Lead. I said bury it, I whisper, looking at the black vein pulsing faintly in the ice. Bury it under concrete, and pray the ice caps don't melt. Because if this ice goes, we all go. This is Captain Nightwhisper. The Vostok Void is not empty, it is full, and it is waiting for the world to get just a little bit warmer. Sleep well, and keep your windows closed. There are stories in the military that refuse to die. They are whispered in mess halls, shared around campfires in training grounds, and debated on internet forums. Some time ago, on this channel, I shared the legend of the Kandahar giant. the story of a special forces team that encountered a biblical monster in the mountains of Afghanistan. That video told you the legend, the version that leaked out to the public, the version that sounded like a myth. But legends are often just blurry reflections of the truth. Last month, I received a package. No return address, just a flash drive containing a series of audio logs and a redacted after-action report from 2002. The man who sent it claims he was there. He claims that the story you know is only half the truth. He says the giant wasn't just a monster living in a cave. He says it was guarding something. And the team that went missing? They didn't just disappear. They were harvested. Forget what you think you know. Forget the rumors. This is the raw, unfiltered account of Operation High Keep. This is how we woke up something that should have stayed asleep. Location: Kandahar Province, Northeastern Mountain Range. Date: August 2002. Unit: Task Force Dagger. Team Spectre. My name is, well, let's just stick to my call sign, Spectre 2-1. Back in 2002, Afghanistan was the Wild West. We were still figuring out the terrain, still figuring out the enemy. But we thought we knew what we were fighting. We thought we were fighting men with AK-47s and ideology. We were wrong. The mission started like any other standard extraction. A patrol unit, call sign Murph, had gone dark in a rugged sector of the mountains, close to the Pakistan border. This area was a jagged scar on the face of the earth. High altitude, endless caves, and goat paths that hadn't changed since Alexander the Great marched his armies through it here to their doom. Murph's team was a recon element. 4 men, good soldiers, experienced. They had checked in at 0800 hours to report a strange structure near a cave entrance. That was their last transmission. After that, silence. But not total silence. Our comms officer, a kid we called Patch, picked up intermittent bursts of static on their frequency. It wasn't speech. It wasn't Morse code. It sounded like screaming, but it was distorted, slowed down, like the batteries in their radios were dying, or like time itself was moving slower where they were. Command authorized a QRF, Quick Reaction Force. That was us. Team Spectre. 8 men loaded into 2 MH-47 Chinook helicopters. We were heavy. We carried M4 carbines with underbarrel grenade launchers, saws, squad automatic weapons, and enough ammo to start a small war. I remember sitting on the ramp of the bird, watching the landscape roll by beneath my boots. The mountains looked like teeth, sharp, gray, unforgiving teeth waiting to chew us up. My team leader, Chief, tapped my helmet. I couldn't hear him over the roar of the rotors, but I saw his hand signals. 5 minutes out, lock and load. I had a bad feeling in my gut. You get that sometimes. It's a primal instinct, something left over from when our ancestors were hunted by saber-toothed tigers. The air felt heavy. The sky was a weird shade of pale, sickly blue. We weren't landing in a hot zone. There was no enemy fire, no RPGs, just the mountain waiting for us. As the pilots flared the Chinook for landing, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and rocks, I looked out at the landing zone. It was a plateau, halfway up a sheer cliff, and right in the middle of the plateau, I saw the first sign that this wasn't a normal extraction. It was the equipment of the Lost Patrol. Their rucksacks, their radios, their helmets. They were lying in a neat pile in the center of the clearing, not scattered during a fight, piled up, like an offering. We ran off the ramp, weapons raised, scanning the high ground. The bird lifted off, leaving us in the sudden crushing silence of the valley. "Spectre actual to Murph," Chief whispered into the comms. "Come in. Over." Silence. "Check the gear," Chief ordered, pointing at the pile. I moved forward, my boots crunching on the loose shale. I reached the pile of equipment. I picked up a helmet. It was dented, not by a bullet and not by a rock. It looked like it had been squeezed, like a soda can crushed in a giant vise. And then I saw the blood. It wasn't splashed on the ground. It was painted on the rocks in symbols I had never seen before. "Chief," I said, my voice shaking despite my training. "You need to see this." We were alone. We were miles from support, and we had just walked into the dining room of something very, very hungry. We moved out in a standard wedge formation, keeping 5-meter spacing. We were professionals. We had trained for every scenario. Ambush, IEDs, hostage rescue. But you can't train for the feeling of being watched by the mountains themselves. The first thing I noticed was the silence. If you've ever been in nature, you know it's never truly quiet. There are always birds, crickets, the rustle of dry grass. But this valley? It was dead. I don't mean empty, I mean dead. There were no goats grazing on the cliffs, no hawks circling in the sky. Even the wind seemed afraid to make a noise here. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Check your sectors," Chief whispered over the comms. "Stay sharp. I don't like this quite." "Copy that," I replied, scanning the ridgeline with my ACOG scope. We found the path leading up to the cave entrance. It wasn't a natural trail. It was worn smooth into the rock, like it had been used for thousands of years. But the steps were weird. They were too far apart. To climb them, a normal human had to take a massive lunge. Whoever, or whatever, made these stairs had a stride twice as long as a man. "Look at the rocks," Miller, our heavy weapons guy, pointed out. I looked. On either side of the path, there were small piles of stones, cans. But as we got closer, I realized they weren't just stones. They were marking a boundary. "Do not cross," our interpreter muttered. He was a local Afghan we had brought with us. He was shaking, clutching his prayer beads so hard his knuckles were white. "This is bad place. Jinns live here. Old giants." "Stow it," Chief snapped. "We're here for Americans, not fairy tales." But I saw the fear in Chief's eyes too. We all felt it, a static charge in the air that made the hair on your arms stand up. The closer we got to the cave mouth, the heavier our legs felt. It was like wading through invisible water. About 300 meters from the cave entrance, the terrain changed. The gray slate of the mountain disappeared under a layer of white. At first, I thought it was snow, or maybe quartz. Then I stepped on it. Crunch. It wasn't snow, it was bone. Thousands of them. It was a literal field of bones stretching all the way to the darkness of the cave. We were walking on a carpet of death. "Hold fire," Chief signaled. "Watch your step." I looked down at the debris. It wasn't just goat bones. I saw human femurs, shattered rib cages, skulls that had been crushed flat, but mixed in with the biological waste, there was history. I kicked aside a pile of ribs and saw something metallic glinting in the sun. I knelt down to inspect it. It was a rusted receiver of an AK-74. Next to it, a tattered piece of a tactical vest. It wasn't American gear, it was Soviet. "Spetsnaz," I whispered. "From the 80s. The Russians had been here. They had tried to take this mountain 20 years ago." "Over here," Miller called out. We moved to his position. He was standing over a large boulder. Embedded in the rock was a heavy machine gun, a DS-ESK. The barrel was bent. Not bent like it hit the ground, bent like someone had grabbed the steel barrel with a bare hand and twisted it into a knot. "What could do that to hardened steel?" Miller asked, his voice low. "Nothing human," I said, standing up and looking toward the cave. The entrance was huge, a gaping maw in the cliff face, easily 15 feet high, and right in front of it, stuck on a pike, was a helmet. An American Kevlar helmet. It belonged to the patrol we were looking for. It was a warning, or an invitation. "Safety's off," Chief ordered. "We're going in." We stopped at the threshold. The sunlight didn't seem to reach past the entrance of the cave. It was like a physical barrier between the world of the living and whatever this was. But before we saw anything, the smell hit us. It wasn't just the smell of rotting corpses. We were soldiers. We knew that smell. This was different. It was a thick, musky stench, like wet dog, copper, and sulfur mixed with old, stagnant blood. It tasted metallic in the back of your throat. "Masks up," Chief ordered, his voice muffled. We pulled our neck gaiters over our noses, but it didn't help. The smell seemed to seep through the fabric. Our interpreter, Ahmed, stopped dead in his tracks. He dropped to his knees in the bone field, refusing to take another step. "No," he whispered, shaking his head violently. "Ifrit, the Devourer. I do not go in." Chief looked at him, then at us. Leave him. Miller, watch our six. If he runs, let him go. We move. We stepped into the shadow. Lights out. Go green, I whispered. One by one, we flipped our nods, night vision devices, down. The world turned into a grainy, green phosphor haze. The cave wasn't natural. The walls were smooth, too smooth. They looked like they had been carved out of the mountain by giant chisels, and the size? The ceiling was at least 30 feet high. Check the floor, I called out softly. The floor was covered in dust, inches thick, but there were tracks in it, massive, barefoot prints. They were humanoid, but they had 6 toes, and the stride, the distance between steps was nearly 5 feet. Whatever made these prints, I muttered to Chief, weighs 1,000 pounds. We moved deeper. The temperature dropped. The air grew heavy and damp. We were walking into the belly of the beast. We were about 100 meters inside when we heard it. Psst. Kirsch. Help. Psst. It was a radio squelch. Hold, Chief signaled. Identify source. We swept our rifles left and right, green laser designators cutting through the dust motes. The sound was coming from ahead, echoing off the high walls. It's Murph's radio, I said. It's transmitting. We pushed forward, moving tactically, heel to toe. The tunnel opened up into a massive cavern. It was like a cathedral of rock. Over there, Miller pointed his laser at the far wall. I followed the beam. My heart skipped a beat. There, embedded in the rock wall, was the radio handset. It wasn't lying on the ground. It was jammed into a crack in the stone, but it was 12 feet off the ground. How the hell did it get up there? Miller whispered. Did they throw it? No, I said, walking closer. Look at the rock around it. I shone my IR, infrared, illuminator on the wall. There were scratches around the radio, claw marks. Someone, something, had stood there and casually pushed the radio into the stone like it was putting a toy on a high shelf. Suddenly, the smell intensified. A gust of hot, rancid air blew from the back of the cavern, and then a sound. Grind, snap. It sounded like heavy rocks being crushed together. It came from the darkness beyond the radio. I looked up, high up. Near the ceiling of the cavern, there was a ledge. Through my night vision goggles, I saw a heat signature. It was huge. It was crouching on the ledge like a gargoyle. Contact front, I screamed. High, 12 o'clock high. The thing stood up. It unfolded itself. It just kept going up and up. Even in the dark, I could see the massive silhouette against the faint light coming from deeper in the tunnels. It held something in its hand, a spear, a club, and then 2 eyes reflected the IR light from our goggles. They glowed a fierce, double-tap red. It let out a roar that shook the dust from the ceiling. It wasn't a scream. It was a challenge. The creature didn't climb down. It jumped. From a height of 30 feet, it landed on the stone floor with the weight of a truck. Boom! The impact shook the ground so hard I almost lost my footing. Dust billowed up like a smoke grenade. Lights! White lights! Chief screamed. Burn it! We switched from night vision to high-intensity tactical flashlights. 6 beams of blinding white light cut through the dust and locked onto the target. And then we saw it. It stood up, towering over us. It had to be at least 12, maybe 15 feet tall. It was humanoid, but its proportions were all wrong. Its arms were too long, hanging down past its knees. Its chest was a barrel of thick, pale muscle covered in scars and filth. But the hair, that was the thing you couldn't look away from. It had a mane of bright, fiery red hair. It was matted and greasy, hanging down its back like a cape. It took a step toward us. The smell became unbearable, like opening a grave that had been baking in the sun. Back up! Back up! I yelled, raising my rifle. The giant stopped. It looked at us with eyes that were too far apart. It bared its teeth in a snarl. And that's when I froze. It didn't just have teeth. It had rows of them. An inner set and an outer set, grinding together like a shark's. In its right hand, it held a weapon. It was a crude spear made from the rusted barrel of that twisted Soviet tank gun, sharpened to a point. Spectre 2-1, take the shot, Chief ordered. Drop it. But before I could squeeze the trigger, The giant moved. For something that size, it was impossibly fast. It covered the 20 feet between us in 2 strides. It swung the metal spear. "Miller, move!" Miller tried to dive, but the makeshift weapon caught him in the shoulder. The sound was sickening. Wet crunching bone and tearing Kevlar. Miller was thrown across the cavern like a rag doll. He hit the far wall and didn't get up. The giant roared again, spit and blood flying from its mouth. It wasn't scared of us. It was offended that we were in its home. "Open fire! Light him up!" The cavern exploded with noise. 5 M4 carbines and a SAW squad automatic weapon opened up at point-blank range. Rat, tat, 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 tat. The muzzle flashes were like strobe lights in a disco from hell. Every round hit. We were trained operators. We didn't miss. I put a full magazine into the creature's chest. I saw the impacts. I saw the flesh ripple. But he didn't fall. The 5.56 mm rounds were just punching into the thick muscle and fat, getting stuck there. It was like shooting a grizzly bear with a BB gun. He flinched. He grunted. But he didn't stop. "Headshots! Go for the head!" Chief screamed over the roar of gunfire. I reloaded, my hands shaking, and aimed for that red mane. The giant shielded its face with a massive forearm. The bullet sparked off something on its arm. Ancient bronze vambrises, embedded into its skin. It lunged again. This time, it grabbed the closest operator. Tex. Tex was a big guy, 220 pounds of muscle. The giant lifted him off the ground with one hand, grabbing him by the tactical vest. It brought Tex close to its face. "Shoot it! Shoot it!" Tex screamed, dangling in the air, hammering his pistol against the giant's fingers. The giant squeezed. We heard the ribs crack over the sound of the gunfire. Then, with a casual flick of its wrist, it tossed Tex aside. "Grenade!" I yelled. "Use the 40 mic. I activated the M203 grenade launcher attached to my rifle. I didn't have time to aim properly. I just pointed at the center of that massive chest. Thump! The grenade flew across the short distance. Boom! The explosion engulfed the giant's torso. It staggered back, finally losing its balance. Shrapnel and fire tore into its skin. It let out a sound that wasn't a roar. It was a high-pitched shriek of pain. It fell to one knee. Black blood oozed from a crater in its chest. "Reloading!" I shouted. "Hit him again! Don't let him get up!" But as the smoke cleared, the giant looked up. Its eyes were burning with pure hate. It reached down, grabbed a rock the size of a microwave, and hurled it at us. We scattered. The rock smashed into the spot where Chief had been standing a second ago. "Fall back," Chief ordered. "To the entrance! Create distance!" We were retreating. The apex predators of the modern military were running from a myth. We were backed into a corner near the cave entrance. The giant was hurt, bleeding black ichor from the grenade wound, but it was still coming. It moved with a limping, furious gait, dragging the heavy spear. "Aim for the face!" Chief screamed, his voice raw. "Everybody! On my mark! 3, 2, 1, execute!" 4 rifles turned into a single wall of lead. We didn't just shoot, we poured fire. We aimed for the eyes, the mouth, the nose. Anything soft. The giant roared, raising its hands to block the hail of bullets, but it was too much. The rounds chewed through its fingers. They smashed into its jaw. One round, maybe it was mine, maybe it was Chief's, punched through the giant's left eye socket. The creature stiffened. It stood there for a second, swaying like a falling tree. Then, it crashed forward. Thud. The ground shook one last time. The giant lay face down in the dirt, twitching. Silence. "Check fire!" Chief panted. "Check fire!" I lowered my weapon, my barrel smoking. We stood there, staring at the monstrosity. It looked even bigger lying down. It was easily 12 feet long. It smelled like ancient earth and copper. "Check on Miller and Tex," Chief ordered. But before we could move, a sound cut through the air. Whoop, 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 whoop. It wasn't our extraction Chinooks. The rhythm was different, heavier. A massive MH-47G Chinook appeared over the ridge, but this one had no markings. It was painted matte black, no tail numbers, no flags. It didn't land. It hovered directly over the plateau. A fast rope dropped, and men in unmarked grey tactical gear slid down. They moved differently than us. Cold, mechanical. They didn't run to check our wounded. They ran straight to the giant. "Secure the perimeter," one of them shouted. He wasn't talking to us. He was talking to his team. "Package acquired. Prepare for sling load." "Who the hell are you?" Chief yelled, stepping forward. "My men are bleeding out." The leader of the grey team turned. He wore a black visor that covered his face. "Stand down, Sergeant. This is now a classified recovery operation. Step away from the biological asset." They threw a massive cargo net over the giant's body. 4 of them struggled to roll the creature over. It must have weighed 1,100 pounds. As they rolled it, I saw its face one last time. Even in death, with half its head gone, it looked regal, like a fallen king from a time before history. The Chinook lowered a hook. They attached the net. As the helicopter lifted off, the giant's body swung in the air, a grotesque trophy hanging against the setting Afghan sun. They took the body. They took the spear. They even swept the dirt where the blood had pooled. Only then did our medevac arrive. The debriefing wasn't a debriefing. It was a threat. They flew us to a base in Oman, separate rooms. No contact with the outside world for 2 weeks. A man in a suit sat across from me. He pushed a piece of paper across the metal table. It was an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. "Sign it," he said. "What about Miller?" I asked. "What about Tex?" "Sergeant Miller and Specialist Tex died in a rock slide during a combat patrol," the man said, his voice flat. "Tragic accident. Their families will be taken care of, assuming you sign this paper." "And the giant?" I asked. "What was that thing?" The man paused. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not fear, respect. "The location you entered is very old, Sergeant. It is mentioned in texts that were written before the Bible. Some things are not meant to be woken up." He stood up and gathered his files. "You didn't see a giant. You saw a bear. A very large cave bear. The altitude caused hallucinations. That is your story. Stick to it." I signed the paper. I served 4 more years, but I never went back to the mountains. Miller and Tex are buried in Arlington. Their tombstones say, "Killed in action." But they don't say what action. They don't say they were killed by a creature that shouldn't exist. I'm an old man now. I don't care about the NDA anymore. The world needs to know. There are things sleeping in the hollow places of the earth. We call them monsters. The ancients called them Nephilim. And we just poked the hornet's nest. This is Captain Nightwhisper. If you are ever in the mountains of Kandahar and you smell rotting meat and sulfur, don't investigate. Just run. Out. My name is Sergeant Marcus Graver. Call sign, Grave. Team leader of Echo Squad, United States Special Forces. If you are listening to this recording, then the official report they gave the press is a lie. We didn't die in a training accident in the Nevada desert. We didn't suffer a mechanical failure, and we certainly didn't vanish without a trace. I am. Currently 5,000 meters above sea level, buried inside a nameless peak in the Tian Shan mountain range. My legs are crushed, my battery is at 4%, and I am not alone in this dark. This tape is my confession. This is the black box they sent us to find, but I am making it myself. The world needs to know what Op Rock really was. They told us it was a recovery mission. They told us a KH-11 spy satellite had gone down over a geological anomaly. They said, "Go in, secure the hard drives, get out." Standard snatch and grab. They lied. There was no satellite. There never was. They didn't send us here to recover technology. They sent us here to feed something. I can hear it moving in the tunnels below me. It sounds like grinding stone. It sounds like the earth itself is chewing on bones. It knows I'm here. It's just waiting for the calcification to finish. I don't have much time. The cold isn't killing me anymore. In fact, the rock feels warm now. That's the first sign, isn't it? When the stone feels like flesh. This is the true account of Operation Black Rock. Listen closely, and for God's sake, if you ever hear a humming sound coming from the ground beneath your feet, run. Don't look back, just run. The turbulence was unlike anything I had ever felt in 20 years of service. It wasn't just wind. It felt like the air itself was fighting us. The Chinook was being tossed around like a toy in a washing machine. I looked around the cabin, bathed in the sickly red glow of the tactical lights. My team sat strapped in, looking more like statues than men. There was Viper, our sniper, cleaning his scope for the 10th time, a nervous tick. Doc, gripping his medkit like a lifeline. Miller, our tech specialist, staring at his tablet with a frown that deepened by the second. And Rook, the kid. It was his first Black Ops rotation. He looked pale, his eyes darting around the shaking hull. He was trying to be brave, but I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like copper and sweat. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot's voice crackled over the comms, barely audible over the screaming engines. I can't hold her steady much longer, Sergeant. The instruments are going haywire. The altimeter is dancing between 10,000 and 0. Just get us on the ground, cowboy, I yelled back, pressing the throat mic against my neck. Drop us on the LZ and get the hell out of the storm. I stood up, grabbing the overhead strap. The floor beneath my boots vibrated violently, but it wasn't the vibration of the engine. It was a lower frequency, something that rattled your teeth and settled deep in your gut. A hum. Check your gear, I barked. Night vision on. We go in hard and fast. No loose ends. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Click, snap, check. I pulled my NVG's, night vision goggles, down. The world turned into a grainy, green phosphor nightmare. Through the open ramp at the back, I saw the target, the mountain. It didn't look like the surrounding peaks. The other mountains were jagged, white with snow, chaotic. This one was wrong. It was too sharp, too jagged, and dark. The snow didn't seem to stick to the upper slopes. It stood like a black fang tearing into the stormy sky. Green light, go, go, go. We unhooked and sprinted off the ramp into the blizzard. The wind hit us like a physical blow, a hammer of ice. We hit the ground hard, rolling and taking up defensive positions instantly. The Chinook didn't linger. As soon as our boots cleared the metal, the pilot pulled up aggressively, the engines screaming as he fought to escape the mountain's gravity. Within seconds, the sound of the rotors faded, swallowed by the howling wind. We were alone. Sound off, I ordered. Viper, good. Doc, good. Miller, good. Rook, I'm good, Sarge. Miller, get me a sit rep. Which way to the crash site? I asked, scanning the perimeter. The visibility was near 0, just swirling snow and black rock. Miller tapped his wrist computer. Then he tapped it harder. He shook his arm. Sarge, I'm getting nothing. GPS is dead. SATCOM is dead. My compass is... Look at this. I walked over to him, shielding my eyes from the snow. I looked at the analog compass on his wrist. The needle wasn't pointing north. It was spinning, round and round and round, fast, like it was terrified of picking a direction. Magnetic interference, Viper grunted, scanning the dark with his rifle. Must be heavy iron deposits in the rock. No, Rook said. His voice was small, trembling. I turned to the kid. He was kneeling on the ground, one glove off, his bare hand pressed against the black stone of the mountain floor. Rook, put your glove back on. You'll get frostbite, Doc warned, stepping forward. It's not cold, Rook whispered, looking up at me. His eyes were wide, reflecting the green glow of my night vision. Sarge, the ground, it's not cold, it's warm. I frowned. We were at 15,000 feet in a blizzard. The ambient temperature was -30. The ground should be a block of ice. I knelt down next to him. I hesitated, then pulled off my own tactical glove. I pressed my palm against the jagged black rock. He was right. It wasn't just warm. It was hot, like the hood of a car that had been running for hours. But it wasn't volcanic heat. It didn't feel like fire. It felt biological, moist, and there was something else. Under my palm, faint but undeniable, I felt a rhythmic thrumming. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a mountain we were standing on. It felt like the chest of a sleeping giant. Gear up, I said, standing up quickly and putting my glove back on to hide the shaking of my hand. We move, now, before whatever is heating this rock decides to wake up. We moved out into the dark, leaving footprints in the snow that melted almost instantly upon touching the black stone. We were walking into the mouth of the beast, and we didn't even know it yet. We marched for 20 minutes, battling a whiteout so dense I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The only thing guiding us was Miller's localized tracker, which was flickering in and out of existence like a dying heartbeat. "Target is 200 meters straight ahead," Miller shouted over the wind. "But Sarge, the readings are wrong." "Define wrong," I yelled back. "The thermal scope. It's lighting up like a Christmas tree. The whole mountainside ahead of us, it's bleeding heat." We pushed through a ridge of sharp rocks and suddenly, the wind died down. Not gradually, instantly. We stepped into a pocket of dead air. The snow fell straight down here, heavy and wet. And there it was. We expected a crash site. Twisted metal, burning debris, a crater. Instead, we found a door. It wasn't a natural cave. Nature doesn't make perfect circles. The entrance was a flawless geometric hole bored straight into the side of the cliff face, about 20 feet in diameter. The edges were perfectly smooth, almost polished. No blast marks, no drilling scars. It looked like someone had taken a giant, hot spoon and scooped the rock out like ice cream. "What in the hell is that?" Viper whispered. He raised his sniper rifle, scanning the darkness inside. "I don't see any satellite debris, just the hole." "Doc, check radiation," I ordered. Doc stepped forward, his Geiger counter clicking sporadically. "Normal background levels, Sarge. Actually, lower than normal. It's like the rock is absorbing the radiation." We stood at the threshold. A warm, humid breeze was flowing out of the tunnel, smelling of ozone and something metallic. Copper? Blood? It was hard to tell. "Miller, are we at the coordinates?" "Dead center, Sarge. The black box signal is coming from inside, deep inside." I looked at the perfect circle of darkness. My gut was screaming at me to turn around. Every survival instinct I had honed over 2 decades was telling me that this wasn't a cave. It was a mouth, and we were walking right down its throat. "Standard formation," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the sudden quiet. "Viper, take point. Rook, watch our 6. We go in, we find the box, we get out. Don't touch the walls." We crossed the threshold. The moment we stepped inside, the sound of the storm vanished completely. It was replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like pressure on my eardrums. The air was thick, hot and dry. I looked at the walls through my NVGs. They weren't rough stone. They were covered in strange, flowing patterns. Not carvings, more like veins. Veins of a slightly lighter mineral running through the black rock, pulsing very, very slowly. "Sarge," Viper called out from the front. He had stopped. "What is it?" "The floor," Viper said. He sounded disturbed. "Look at the dust." I looked down. The floor of the tunnel was covered in a thick layer of gray dust, but it wasn't undisturbed. There were drag marks, deep furrows in the dust leading deeper into the cave. "Something was dragged in here," Doc said, kneeling down. "Recently." "Or something dragged itself in," Viper muttered. "Eyes up," I commanded. "Stay sharp." We moved deeper. The tunnel angled downward, spiraling into the heart of the mountain. The heat was rising. I was sweating under my gear now, and that sound, that low, rhythmic thumping I felt at the landing zone, it was louder here. It was vibrating in the soles of my boots. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a clock ticking down, or a heart waiting to speed up. The tunnel didn't end, it opened up. We stepped out of the narrow corridor into a cavern so vast that our flashlights couldn't hit the ceiling. It was a cathedral of shadow. The air here was stiflingly hot, maybe 30 degrees Celsius. But it wasn't the size of the room that stopped us dead in our tracks. It was what stood in the center. "Dear God," Doc whispered. Rising from the floor of the cavern was a single massive object, the monolith. It was a slab of obsidian black stone, easily 50 feet tall and 20 feet wide. It was perfectly rectangular, sharp-edged, and utterly featureless. It didn't look like it was built on the floor. It looked like it had grown out of it, piercing through the earth like a jagged bone spur. My tactical light hit the surface of the object, but there was no reflection. The light didn't bounce back. The rock swallowed the beam. It was like looking into a hole in reality, a void in the shape of a tombstone. Is that the satellite?" Rook asked. His voice was trembling, but not with fear, with awe. "That's no satellite, kid," Miller said, checking his scanner frantically. "Sarge, I'm getting readings off the charts. Not radiation, electromagnetic waves. This thing is broadcasting. It's a transmitter." "Broadcasting to who?" Viper asked, keeping his rifle trained on the dark void of the stone. "Not to who," Miller replied, his face pale in the glow of his screen. "To where? The signal isn't going up into space. It's going down, into the crust." I walked closer, keeping my weapon raised. The monolith had a presence. Gravity seemed heavier near it. The hum was deafening in my head now, making my teeth ache. "Secure the perimeter!" I shouted, trying to break the trance the object seemed to cast on us. "Miller, hook up to the base, see if there's an interface. Viper, watch the exits. There are other tunnels leading into this chamber." But no one moved. They were all staring at it, especially Rook. The kid had lowered his weapon. He was walking towards the monolith, his steps slow and deliberate. He looked like a sleepwalker. "Rook, stand down!" I barked. He didn't hear me. He was mumbling something, over and over again. I ran towards him, grabbing his shoulder to spin him around. "I said stand down, soldier!" Rook turned to look at me. Under the green tint of the night vision, his eyes looked wide, blown out. He was smiling, a faint, terrible smile. "Can't you hear it, Sarge?" he whispered. "It's singing." "Nothing is singing, Rook. Snap out of it." "It knows us," Rook continued, looking back at the black stone. "It knows we're here. It says, the shell is cracking." Before I could stop him, Rook reached out. He pulled his glove off with his teeth, dropping it to the dusty floor. His bare hand hovered inches from the surface of the monolith. "Rook, don't touch it!" He didn't listen. He pressed his naked palm flat against the obsidian surface. The hum stopped. The vibration stopped. Rook stood there, frozen, his hand glued to the stone. "Rook?" I asked, raising my rifle. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Then slowly, he turned his head back to me. The smile was gone. His face was a mask of pure terror. "It's not a rock," he gasped. "It's a lid, and we just opened it." Then I saw it. Where his hand touched the black stone, the darkness began to spread. Not onto the rock, but onto him. A stain of charcoal gray crept from his fingertips, moving up his wrist, hardening his skin, turning flesh into stone in seconds. The infection had begun. "Get him back! Get him away from it!" I screamed, my voice cracking under the adrenaline. Viper didn't hesitate. He tackled Rook, slamming into the kid's chest and dragging him violently away from the monolith. Rook didn't fight back. He felt heavy. When he hit the floor, it didn't sound like a body hitting dirt. It sounded like a sack of wet cement slapping against concrete. "Doc, get on him," I ordered, keeping my rifle trained on the monolith, half expecting it to move, to attack. But the stone stood silent. The hum had stopped. It was waiting. Doc was already ripping open his medical kit. "Rook, stay with me. Let me see the hand." Rook was hyperventilating, staring at his own arm. Viper held him down, but his face was pale. "Sarge, look at his arm. Jesus Christ, look at it." I shone my tactical light on Rook's right hand. The glove was gone. The skin from his fingertips to his elbow was no longer flesh-colored. It was a dull, charcoal gray. It looked like rough slate. "Can you move your fingers?" Doc asked, his voice shaking. Rook tried. We all heard it. Krk! Krk! It was the sound of stone grinding against stone. His fingers twitched stiffly, like the joints of a rusty statue. "It doesn't hurt," Rook whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Why doesn't it hurt, Doc? I can't feel my hand. It feels heavy." "Miller," I shouted, turning to our comms specialist. "Get us an evac, now! We have a casualty! Biological containment breach!" Miller was frantically tapping his headset, spinning dials on his chest rig. "I'm trying, Sarge, but the frequencies they're jammed." "Jammed by what? The storm?" "No, listen. Miller ripped his headset off and held it out to me. Listen to the static. I grabbed the headset and pressed it to my ear. I expected white noise, screeching wind. Instead, I heard water. Poof! Crash! It was unmistakable. The sound of heavy, rhythmic waves crashing against metal pillars. The groan of steel bending under pressure. The cry of seagulls, distorted and distant. What is that? I asked, a cold chill running down my spine. Is that the ocean? We are 2,000 miles from the nearest coastline, Miller said, his eyes wide with terror. But that signal is coming through crystal clear. Sarge, it's not coming from the sky. It's coming from below us. I looked back at the monolith. It's a receiver, I realized. Rook completed the circuit. It's listening to something else. Suddenly, the voice in the headset changed. The waves receded, and a human voice broke through the static. It was faint, tinny, and filled with panic. Rig 42 to anyone. The drill. We hit something. It's alive. Burning. Help us. The transmission cut out, replaced by the grinding sound of rock. I dropped the headset. The silence in the cave returned, heavier than before. That was a distress call, Doc said softly. From an oil rig? How? Viper asked. How is a rock in a mountain receiving radio from an oil rig? Rook groaned on the floor. The grey stain had moved past his elbow. It was climbing towards his shoulder. They are connected, Rook gasped. His voice sounded different now, deeper, rougher, like gravel in a mixer. The blood in the water, the bone in the mountain, one body, one sleeper. He looked at me. His pupils were dilating. One of them was turning grey. He's waking up, Sarge, and he's hungry. We dragged Rook to the far wall, as far away from the monolith as possible. We set up a perimeter, rifles aimed at the darkness, while Doc worked on the kid. It wasn't working. I can't get a vein, Doc hissed, throwing a broken syringe to the floor. The needle won't go in. His skin. It's too hard. I crouched beside them. Rook was sitting up against the cave wall. His right arm was now completely calcified. It hung at his side, useless, a perfect sculpture of a human arm made of dark grey stone. The infection had reached his neck. Grey veins were spiderwebbing up his jawline. Rook, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Talk to me. What are you feeling? Rook looked at me. His right eye was gone, turned into a smooth grey marble. His left eye was terrified. It's quiet, Sarge, he rasped. He couldn't move the right side of his mouth. The fear is gone. It just feels solid, permanent. We're going to get you out, I lied. Chopper is 5 minutes out. Rook laughed, a dry, cracking sound. Don't lie to the dead, Grave. You heard the radio, the protocol. He tried to lift his stone arm. He couldn't. But the fingers moved on their own. They tapped a rhythm on the floor. Tap, 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 tap. Doc, what is that? I asked, pointing at the fingers. Involuntary muscle spasms, Doc said, wiping sweat from his forehead. No, Viper said from the shadows. That's not a spasm, that's code. We all looked at the stone fingers, tapping against the rock floor. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's counting, Miller whispered. It's counting us. Rook's head snapped back against the wall with a sickening thud. His neck locked in place, the grey spread over his chin, sealing his lips shut on the right side. Kill me, Rook mumbled through half a mouth. Please, before I go into the hive. What hive, Rook? I gripped his good shoulder. What do you see? The network, he slurred. I see millions of them, buried in the earth, like this one, all over the world, waiting for the signal. His remaining eye locked onto mine. The oil, the black oil, it's the mind. The rock is the receiver. Don't let them connect. Don't let the signal. He choked. The grey stone surged up, covering his nose, his left cheek. His last eye began to cloud over. Do it! Viper yelled, racking the slide of his rifle. He's turning. End it. Stand down, I ordered. He's gone, Sarge. Look at him. Rook's body went rigid. His chest stopped rising. He was a statue, a perfect, terrifying statue of a screaming soldier, frozen in eternal agony. We stood there in silence. The only sound was our own breathing and the distant hum of the monolith. Then the statue spoke. It didn't move its lips. The sound didn't come from a throat. It vibrated directly from the stone chest cavity, a low, grinding resonance. Subject confirmed. Integration complete. Accessing tactical memories. It wasn't Rook's voice. It sounded like two tectonic plates rubbing together. Viper screamed and opened fire. "Cease fire! You're gonna kill us all!" I tackled Viper, wrestling the rifle away. When we looked back at Rook, he wasn't damaged. The bullets had flattened against his skin. It was still sitting there. And then slowly, the stone head turned. The gray blind eyes looked directly at Viper. "Threat detected," the stone voice ground out. "Initiating purge." The walls of the cave began to shift. Grave. "Seal it! Miller, help me seal it!" Miller. "It's rusted shut. Push." Grave. "Sound off. Who made it?" Doc. "I'm here. I think I'm gonna be sick." Viper. "Did you see it? Did you see the walls? They were reaching for us, like hands." Grave. "Focus. Where are we?" I raised my flashlight. We weren't in a natural cave anymore. We were in a man-made structure, but it wasn't American. The walls were lined with rotting green panels. Old, bulky computer terminals sat on rusted metal desks. Dust motes danced in the beam of my light, thick as fog. "Look at the writing," Miller whispered, wiping dust off a console. "Cyrillic. It's Russian." Viper. "Russians? In the Tian Shan Mountains? This far deep?" Grave. "This isn't a listening post," I said, walking deeper into the room. "Look at the equipment, spectrometers, seismic drills, biological containment units. This was a lab." We moved through the ghostly facility. It felt like a tomb. And then we found the crew. They weren't lying on the floor. They were part of the room. A skeleton in a tattered Soviet uniform was sitting in a chair, but his spine had fused with the metal backrest. His hands were merged with the table, the bone turning into steel, the steel turning into stone. "Calcification," Doc muttered, scanning the body. "Just like Rook, but slower. These men didn't die instantly. They sat here and waited to turn into statues." "Sarge, over here!" Miller called out. He was holding a thick, leather-bound logbook. "I found the commander's journal. It's dated 1982. "Read it," I ordered. Miller flipped the brittle pages. "My Russian is rusty, but listen to this." Miller, reading or translating. "Day 40. The drilling has stopped. We hit the barrier. It is not natural rock. It is a shell." Day 45. We made contact with Station Vostok in Antarctica. They report the same findings. They drill into the ice and find the blood, fluid. We drill into the mountain and find the bone, solid. It is one organism. The earth is merely the skin keeping it asleep. Miller stopped. He looked up at me, his face pale. "Project Vostok. That's the rig, isn't it? Rig 42? "Keep reading," Viper snapped. "How do we kill it?" Miller. Day 52. The frequency is increasing. The men are hearing voices. They see enemies in the shadows. We are sealing the doors. Not to keep the Americans out, but to keep the stone in. If the blood and the bone connect, if the signal completes, the shell will crack. God save us all. Grave. "The signal," I whispered. Rook touched the monolith. He completed the circuit. Doc. "So we're not just fighting a rock," Doc said, his voice trembling. "We're fighting the planet's immune system, and we are the virus." Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. The old Soviet terminals, dead for 40 years, buzzed to life. Green phosphor screens lit up with a single blinking message in Russian. Viper. "What does it say?" Miller. "It says, protocol initiated. Purge organic matter." Grave. "Turn it off. Miller, kill the power." Miller. "I can't. It's not running on electricity. It's running on the monolith's energy." The sound wasn't just noise. It was a frequency designed to scramble the human brain. I felt a sharp pain behind my eyes. My vision started to blur. Shadows in the corners of the room began to stretch and twist. Viper. Get back! Stay back! I spun around. Viper had his rifle raised. He was aiming at Doc. Grave. Viper, stand down! That's Doc! Viper. No! Look at him! Look at his face! Viper screamed, his eyes wild. He's one of them! He's made of stone! He's got no eyes! I looked at Doc. He looked normal to me. Terrified, sweating, human. But to Viper, the frequency was painting a monster over his friend's face. Doc. Viper, please, put the gun down. It's the sound. It's hallucination. Viper. You're lying. I saw what you did to Rook. You fed him to the wall. Grave. Viper, look at me. I stepped between them, hands raised. It's Grave. We are your team. We are Echo Squad. Viper swung the rifle towards me. Through the barrel, I stared into the eyes of a man who was no longer there. The discipline was gone. Only primal fear remained. You're not Grave, Viper whispered. Grave is dead. You're just a statue wearing his skin. Grave. Don't do it, soldier. Viper. Get out of my head! Time slowed down. I felt the heat of the bullet pass my cheek. It missed me by an inch. It didn't miss Miller. Miller, who was behind me trying to smash the console, grunted. A wet, heavy sound. He dropped to his knees. A dark stain bloomed on his chest rig. Dogyok. Miller! Viper blinked. The sound of the gunshot seemed to snap him out of the hallucination for a second. He looked at his smoking rifle. He looked at Miller bleeding on the floor. Viper. No, I didn't. I saw a monster. Grave. Doc, get to Miller. I lunged at Viper, slamming the butt of my rifle into his face. He went down hard, unconscious before he hit the floor. I zip-tied his hands instantly. I crawled over to Miller. Doc was pressing gauze into the wound, but the blood wasn't right. It wasn't soaking into the gauze. It was hitting the floor and moving. The droplets of blood were rolling across the dusty concrete like mercury, gathering together, pulling towards the walls. Miller. Sarge. Miller coughed, blood bubbling on his lips. The signal. It's in my head. I can see the layout. Grave. Save your strength, Miller. Miller. No. Listen. The Soviet map. On the screen. There's an elevator. Behind the bulkhead. It goes up to the surface. He gripped my hand. His skin was turning cold. Not dead cold. Stone cold. Miller. Don't let me turn, Grave. Please. Don't let me become part of the wall. I looked at his wound. The edges were already turning gray. The calcification was accelerating. The gunshot had opened a direct path for the infection. I looked at Doc. Doc shook his head slowly. There was nothing he could do. I pulled my sidearm. My hand felt heavy. Grave. I promise, Miller, you won't turn. Miller closed his eyes. He nodded once. Grave. Grab Viper. We're leaving. We find that elevator, or we die trying. Doc. Sarge, look at the blood. I looked. Miller's blood had reached the wall. The green panels were absorbing it, and as they did, the blast door, the one we had sealed, began to unlock. Click, clack, hiss. The door slid open. Standing in the darkness of the tunnel wasn't the Rook statue. It was hundreds of them. The previous Soviet team, statues of bone and uniform, pulled from the walls, blocking our only exit. Grave. Reload. We're going up. Grave. Move! Back to the elevator! Go! We ran. Or we tried to. Dragging Viper's unconscious body between us, Doc and I stumbled back into the corridor. Behind us, the statues were pouring out of the sealed room like a landslide. They didn't scream. They didn't shout. They just made that sound. That grinding, clicking sound of bone turning against stone sockets. Doc. They're blocking the hallway! Sarge, there's too many of them! I turned and raised my rifle. The lead creature, a Soviet officer, whose face was a featureless slab of gray slate, lunged at me. I fired a 3-round burst into its chest. Ping, ping, crack. The bullet sparked off its stone torso. It didn't even slow down. It swung a heavy, calcified arm, smashing into the wall next to my head. Concrete dust exploded into my eyes. Grave. Bullets are useless. Doc, the grenade. Give me the thermite. Doc fumbled with his vest, tossing me a canister. I pulled the pin. The fuse hissed. A burning magnesium scream. Grave. Frag out! Cover! I rolled the thermite grenade under the feet of the advancing horde. We threw ourselves around the corner just as it detonated. The heat wave hit us, smelling of burning sulfur and ozone. The blast didn't kill them, but it melted them. The front line of the stone soldiers fused together into a molten slag, creating a barricade that blocked the others behind them. Grave. That won't hold them forever. To the lift. Miller said it was behind the bulkhead. We reached the heavy blast door at the end of the hall. I slammed my fist into the override panel. Nothing. No power. Doc. It's dead. We're trapped. From behind the wall of molten stone, we heard them scratching, breaking through. Grave. Manual release. Pull the chain. We grabbed the rusted chains hanging from the ceiling. We pulled with everything we had. My muscles screamed. Viper groaned on the floor, waking up to the nightmare. Creak. Groan. Clang. The door lifted just enough for us to slide under. We dragged Viper through and let the door slam shut. We were in a vertical shaft. In the center, a primitive industrial elevator cage hung from thick, greasy cables. Viper, weakly. Where are we? Grave. We're leaving, Viper. Get in the cage. We scrambled into the rusted cage. I hit the up lever. The gears ground against each other. Sparks showered down on us. The cage shuddered, and then, miraculously, began to rise. As we ascended, I looked through the mesh floor. Below us, the blast door we just passed was being torn apart. Dozens of gray hands were reaching into the shaft, clawing at the empty air. And below them, deep in the pit, I saw a glow, a pulsing, violet light, the heart of the mountain. It looked like a giant, unblinking eye staring up at us. Doc. Don't look down, Sarge. Just watch the numbers climb. The elevator rattled upwards, carrying us away from hell, or so we thought. The elevator breached the surface. We burst out of a hidden hatch on the snowy peak, gasping for freezing, clean air. The storm was raging, but it felt like a blessing compared to the stifling heat of the caves. We collapsed in the snow. Viper was conscious now, shivering violently, clutching his head. Grave. Echo. Actual to command. Echo actual to command. Do you copy? Over. I screamed into the radio handset, praying the interference was gone. For a moment, just static. Then a voice. Clear. Cold. Command. Echo. Actual. This is Overwatch. Authenticate. Grave. Authenticate. We have casualties. Mission is FUBAR. We have a biological containment breach. Requesting immediate dust-off. Get us off this rock. Command. Echo Actual. Authenticate code phrase. What is the status of the package? I looked at Viper and Doc. They were barely alive. Rook and Miller were dead. Grave. Authentication code, Delta 9 Zulu. The package is active. It's hostile. The whole mountain is hostile. There was a long pause on the radio. Too long. Command. Copy that, Echo. Package confirmed active. You have confirmed the existence of the organism. Grave. Yeah, we confirmed it. Now send the extraction. We are at the LZ. Command. Negative, Echo. Extraction is not authorized. My blood ran cold. Colder than the snow. Grave. Say again, Overwatch. We are the only survivors. We have vital intel. Command. You are the intel sergeant. You have been exposed to the contaminant. Protocol, Broken Arrow, is in effect. Quarantine measures are active. Doc. What does that mean? Grave, what are they saying? Grave. It means... I looked up at the sky. Above the storm clouds, I heard a sound. Not the chop of a rescue helicopter. It was the roar of jet engines. Fast movers. Grave. It means we were never the recovery team. We were the canary in the coal mine. They sent us in to see if the trap would snap shut. Viper. They're gonna leave us here? Grave. No, they're not leaving us. I pointed to the horizon. 3 distinct trails of smoke were piercing the clouds, heading straight for the peak. Cruise missiles. Grave. They're going to sterilize the site. Doc. Oh God, we're dead. Grave. Not yet. I turned back to the hatch we just crawled out of. The hum from below was getting louder. The ground beneath our boots began to shake, not from the missiles, but from the mountain itself. Grave. The missiles won't kill it. They think they're burying a biological weapon. They don't know they're about to wake up a god. I keyed the mic one last time. Grave. Overwatch, this is Grave. You have no idea what you've done. You're not destroying it. You're setting it free. I couldn't hear the explosion. I felt it. The shockwave picked me up and threw me 20 feet through the air. I hit the jagged rock face hard, my ribs snapping like dry twigs. I lay there in the snow, staring up at the sky. The blizzard was gone. The heat from the explosion had vaporized the snow for a mile in every direction. The air was filled with black smoke and falling ash. Grave. Doc, Viper, sound off. My voice was a whisper. I tasted copper, blood. I dragged myself up on my elbows. Viper was gone. The spot where he stood was just a crater. Doc was lying near the edge of the cliff. He wasn't moving. A slab of rock the size of a car had landed on his lower body. Grave. Doc! I crawled towards him. The pain in my legs was blinding, but I ignored it. When I reached him, his eyes were open. They were gray, stone. The calcification had finished him in the instant of death. He was a statue, reaching for a med kit he would never use. Grave. I'm sorry, Doc. I'm so sorry. Then the ground moved. It wasn't an aftershock. The entire peak of the mountain, or what was left of it, shifted. The smoke cleared, and I saw what the missiles had done. They hadn't destroyed the monolith. They hadn't collapsed the cave. They had cracked the shell. The top of the mountain crumbled away like a dry eggshell, and rising from the dust wasn't rock. It was skin. Black obsidian, armored skin. A limb, miles wide, began to push itself up from the crater. It looked like a finger, a giant, jointed finger that made of volcanic glass. Then another, then another. The mountain wasn't a mountain. It was a hand, a fist that had been buried underground for millions of years, clenched tight. And now, thanks to the missiles, the fist was opening. I watched in paralyzed horror as the fingers clawed at the sky. The sheer scale of it broke my mind. The fingers were scraping the clouds. Lightning arced between them. Grave. Command, you idiots! I laughed, a hysterical, broken laugh. You didn't kill it. You woke it up. The ground beneath me tilted. The hand was pushing against the earth, trying to lift the rest of its body. The entire Tian Shan range. It wasn't a mountain chain. It was a spine, a backbone rising from the slumber of eons. And then I heard the answer. Far away, thousands of miles to the west, through the deep vibration in the rock, I heard the echo of the ocean, the sound of Rig 42. The blood, ocean, was calling. The bone, mountain, was answering. The giant hand slammed down onto the plateau, crushing the remains of the Soviet lab, crushing the LZ, crushing the illusion that humans were the masters of this world. I slid down the tilting rock, my legs useless. I wedged myself into a crevice, watching the apocalypse unfold in slow motion. The sky turned a sickly violet color, the same light from the cave. The mountain was standing up. Grave. My legs are gone. I can't feel them anymore. I looked down a minute ago. They aren't bleeding. They are gray. The stone has taken them. Grave. The vibration is soothing now. It doesn't hurt. It feels inevitable. I am becoming part of it, part of the mountain. I can hear its thoughts. It's not angry. It doesn't hate us. It just doesn't care. We are dust on its skin. Grave. If you find this recording, if you are hearing my voice, don't send a rescue team. Don't send a nuke. You can't kill a planet. Grave. There are other sleeping spots. The Marianas Trench, Yellowstone, Antarctica. They are all connected. They are all waking up. Grave. My hands are turning now. I can't hold the recorder much longer. It's beautiful in a way. The silence of the stone. I'm going to sleep now. When I wake up, I will be the mountain. Grave. This is Sergeant Marcus Graver, Echo Actual, signing off. Forever. The recording ends here. At least, that is where Sergeant Graves' story stops. But deep beneath our feet, and in the darkest trenches of the ocean, the sleeper is fully awake now. If you can still hear that ringing in your ears, if you can feel the floor vibrating, you are not alone. Light a flare before you go. Hit that like button so I know you survived the broadcast. And if you want to dig deeper into the secrets of this world, if you are brave enough to face what comes next, hit subscribe and join the crew, because Rig 42 and Black Rock were just the cracks in the shell. The real darkness is just getting started. Tell me in the comments, do you think we are safe? I am Captain Nightwhisper. Until the next nightmare, stay in the light. If you can.
We are taught from a young age that hell is a spiritual place. We are told it is a dimension of suffering, separated from our reality by death, by sin, by the intangible veil of the soul. We are told that you cannot walk to hell, you cannot drive there, and you certainly cannot dig there. But what if we were wrong? What if the ancient maps were not metaphors? What if the underworld is not a metaphysical concept, but a physical location? A geographical coordinate waiting just 12 kilometers beneath the soles of your feet? In 1989, the Soviet Union abruptly halted the drilling of the Kola super-deep borehole. It was the deepest man-made hole in history. The official reason was a lack of funding and higher than expected temperatures. But the unofficial story, the legend that circulated in the dark corners of the Kremlin, was that they stopped because of what they heard. They lowered a microphone into the abyss, and instead of the shifting of tectonic plates, they recorded the sounds of human screaming. The Soviets sealed the hole. They welded it shut and tried to forget. But the United States government does not like to be outdone, and they certainly do not like to leave a mystery unsolved. While the world was distracted by the fall of the Berlin Wall, a black budget operation was sanctioned by the Department of Defense. Codename, Project Tartarus. Location, a classified geological anomaly deep within the Brooks Range of northern Alaska. The objective was simple: drill past the Mohorovičić discontinuity, breach the crust, and deploy a manned probe into the subsonic cavity detected by seismic scans. They weren't looking for oil. They weren't looking for minerals. They were looking for the source of a low-frequency broadcast that had been interfering with NORAD radar systems for 3 years. A broadcast coming from inside the planet. Tonight, we are declassifying the recovered audio logs of Team Delta. 10 men, elite geologists, engineers, and Special Forces operators. They entered the capsule on November 14th, 1990. They were supposed to go down for 24 hours. They never came back up. But their audio feed, it kept transmitting. It kept recording long after their life support should have failed. Long after their minds should have snapped. What you are about to hear is not science fiction. It is the documentation of humanity's deepest mistake. I am Captain Nightwhisper. Secure your surroundings. Do not listen to this in the dark, because once you hear the sounds from 12 kilometers down, you will realize that the ground beneath you is not as thick as you think. Let us begin the descent. The cold up here doesn't just bite, it chews. I'm standing on the gantry of the main drilling platform, looking out over the tundra. It's noon, but the sun is just a pale, bruised smear on the horizon. In Alaska, in November, the light is just a rumor. The wind is howling through the steel lattice of the derrick, a constant, mournful shriek that sounds like the landscape itself is in pain. My name is Commander James Vance. I've led operations in Vietnam, Grenada, and Panama. I've seen combat in jungles so thick you couldn't see your own hand, and in cities burning to the ground. But I have never felt unease like this. Project Tartarus is an engineering marvel, I'll give them that. The facility is disguised as a radar station, buried halfway into the side of a mountain. But the heart of it is the borehole, a reinforced shaft 3 meters wide, plunging straight down into the gut of the earth. It's not just a drill hole anymore. They've spent the last 18 months widening it, reinforcing the walls with a titanium carbide alloy, turning it into a vertical tunnel capable of supporting the Icarus descent capsule. I met the team an hour ago in the briefing room, a mix of military stoicism and nervous scientific energy. Dr. Eris Thorne is our lead geologist. He's a thin man, chain-smoking unfiltered cigarettes, his fingers stained yellow. He keeps looking at the seismic charts with a mix of fascination and terror. He told me yesterday that the readings from the cavity below don't make geological sense. It's too hollow, he said. Rock shouldn't hold a shape like that under this much pressure. It's like a lung. Then there's Sergeant Miller and Corporal Hideo, my security detail. Good men, heavy weapons specialists. They're checking their gear for the 10th time. They're carrying standard issue M16s, but loaded with depleted uranium rounds. I asked General Irons why we needed armor-piercing rounds to shoot at rocks. He didn't answer. He just handed me the mission dossier and told me to read the section on biological contingencies. Biological contingencies, 12 kilometers underground. The thought is laughable, and yet here I am checking the seal on my hazmat suit. The Icarus capsule is hanging over the abyss like a bullet in a chamber. It's a claustrophobic cylinder, reinforced to withstand pressure that would crush a submarine like a soda can. There are 10 seats strapped along the walls facing inward. No windows, just monitors connected to external cameras and floodlights. Commander, we are green for insertion, the comms officer says over the headset. His voice is crackly, fighting the static of the magnetic interference that seems to radiate from the hole. I walk across the metal grating to the capsule. The sound of my boots echoes, but the sound from the hole, that's what stops me. If you stand right at the edge, past the safety rail, you can hear it. It's not the wind, it's a low, rhythmic thrumming, like a massive generator running miles away. Or a heartbeat. It vibrates in the soles of your feet. It makes your teeth ache. Dr. Thorne is already strapped in. He's staring at a small photo of his daughter. Miller is joking with Hideo, trying to break the tension, but his laughter sounds brittle. All right, ladies, I bark, stepping inside the capsule. The air inside smells of recycled oxygen and industrial grease. Strap in, systems check. The hatch hisses shut. The heavy clank of the locking bolts engaging seals our fate. We are cut off from the wind, the cold, and the pale sun. Now there is only the hum of the internal scrubbers and the green glow of the instrument panels. Control, this is Delta 1, I say into the mic. Hatch sealed. Pressure equalization complete. Ready to drop. Copy, Delta 1, Control replies. Initiating descent sequence. Good hunting, Commander. Good hunting. What a strange thing to say to a team of explorers. The winch engages. The capsule lurches. My stomach drops as gravity takes over. We begin to move. Slowly at first, then picking up speed. The cameras on the monitors show the walls of the shaft blurring past, gray concrete turning to jagged rock, turning to smooth drilled obsidian. We are leaving the surface world behind. The depth meter on the wall ticks over. 500 meters, 1,000 meters. The radio chatter from the surface is already getting fuzzy. The rock is swallowing the signal. I look at the faces of my men. They are calm, professional, but I can see it in their eyes, the primitive fear of being buried alive. We are descending into a grave that we dug for ourselves. And for a split second, as we pass the 2-kilometer mark, the lights in the capsule flicker. Just a momentary brownout. But in that second of darkness, I swear I heard something over the external audio pickups. It wasn't the grinding of the winch. It wasn't the shifting of rock. It sounded like a scratch. A long, deliberate scratch against the metal hull of the capsule from the outside. I look at Miller. He heard it too. His hand is hovering over the safety of his rifle. Just ice falling, I say, trying to sound convinced. Just loose debris. But ice doesn't scratch. Ice shatters. We are dropping fast now, into the throat of the world, and I have a feeling that whatever is down there knows we are coming. 4 kilometers down, the human mind isn't built to comprehend this kind of depth. We are creatures of the surface. We are used to the sky, to the horizon, to open space. Down here, space is a concept that doesn't exist. There is only the shaft, a perfectly round, laser-drilled throat of stone that is swallowing us inch by inch. The temperature is rising. The internal sensors are reading 45 degrees Celsius outside the hull. The cooling systems are humming louder, a desperate mechanical whine fighting against the geothermal oven we are descending into. Inside the capsule, condensation is starting to form on the metal walls. It drips down in slow, heavy beads, like the capsule is sweating. Dr. Thorne has unbuckled his restraints against protocol and is hovering over the sensor array. His face is illuminated by the harsh green light of the sonar display. "Look at this," he mutters, pointing at a jagged line on the screen. "Just look at the density readings." I unclip and float over to him. The gravity feels slightly heavier down here, or maybe it's just the psychological weight of the rock above us. "Talk to me, Doctor. What am I looking at?" "The rock," Thorne whispers, his eyes wide. "We just passed through a layer of basalt. But look at the composition. It's porous, not like volcanic rock. It's cellular." "Cellular?" I ask, frowning. "It looks like bone structure, Commander," he says, tapping the glass. "Microscopic calcified lattices. If I didn't know better, I'd say we weren't drilling through crust anymore. I'd say we were drilling through a fossilized rib cage the size of a continent." I look at the screen. The patterns do look disturbingly organic, like the marrow of a giant petrified bone. "Keep it to yourself, Doc," I say quietly, glancing at the rest of the team. Sergeant Miller is cleaning his rifle for the third time. Corporal Hideo is staring at the external camera feed, watching the walls of the shaft blur past in a dizzying streak of gray and black. Suddenly, the capsule jolts. It's a violent metal-on-metal slam that throws me against the bulkhead. The emergency lights flicker red. The descent winch groans, a terrifying sound that reverberates through the hull like a dying whale. "Status!" I bark, grabbing a handhold. "We hit a snag," the pilot, Lieutenant Graves, yells from the control seat. "Guide rails are scraping the shaft. It's getting tighter." "That's impossible," Thorne says. "This shaft was widened to 3 meters constant diameter. It can't get tighter." "Well, tell that to the hull sensors," Graves snaps. "External pressure is spiking. It's like the walls are pushing in." I pull myself up to the monitor, showing the external camera view. The floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the rock face just inches from our window. Thorne was right. It doesn't look like rock anymore. It looks slick, wet. There is a sheen to it, like obsidian, but softer, and it is pulsing. I blink, thinking it's a trick of the strobe lights. But I see it again, a subtle, rhythmic contraction of the shaft walls. "Stop the descent," I order. "Commander?" Graves looks at me, confused. "I said stop the damn descent. Hold position at 4.2 clicks." The winch brakes engage with a screech. The Icarus capsule hangs suspended in the dark, swinging slightly. The silence that follows is heavy. "Why are we stopping?" Miller asks, his voice tight. "Look at the wall," I say, pointing to the screen. We all watch. For 10 seconds, nothing happens, just static rock. Then we all see it. A tremor runs through the stone, a ripple. It travels up the shaft like a peristaltic wave in a throat. The rock expands, then contracts, scraping against the titanium skin of our capsule. Scream! The sound sets my teeth on edge. It's the sound of the earth trying to crush us. "It's geologically unstable," Thorne stammers, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Thermal expansion. The heat is making the rock swell." "That wasn't expansion, Doc," Hideo says, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair so hard his knuckles are white. "That moved, like a muscle." I grab the comms mic. "Control, this is Delta 1. We are encountering structural anomalies in the shaft. Walls are shifting, requesting permission to abort and ascend for structural assessment." I wait for the reply. I wait for the reassuring voice of the surface command. Static. "Control, this is Delta 1. Do you copy?" More static, but this time it's not white noise. Through the crackle, I hear a sound, a low, rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It sounds exactly like the heartbeat I heard on the surface, but down here it's louder. It's coming from below us. "Commander," the comms officer says, his face pale. "I'm not getting control. The cable is intact, but the signal is dead. We are cut off." Well, I look at my men. 4 kilometers of rock above us, unknown kilometers below. No comms, and the walls are closing in. "Override the safety," I say, my voice steady, though my heart is hammering. We push through. If we try to go up, the winch might stall against the friction. Our only way out is through the cavity. Graves, resume descent, full speed. We drop again. The scraping sound screams against the hull, louder and louder, until suddenly, pop. We burst through the constriction. The ride smooths out. But as I look back at the camera feed, looking up at the section we just passed, I see the walls settle back into place. They didn't just expand, they healed. The hole closed up behind us. We aren't just descending anymore. We have been swallowed. 7 kilometers. We are now deeper than the deepest part of the ocean. If the Marianas Trench were a mountain, we would be standing at its peak, looking down into an abyss that has no name. The mood in the capsule has shifted from anxiety to a kind of numb, focused terror. No one is speaking unless necessary. The air scrubbers are working overtime, but the air feels thick, heavy. It tastes metallic like copper and ozone. We passed the bone layer, as Thorne calls it, 2 kilometers ago. Now the geology has changed again. The walls of the shaft are no longer smooth. They are jagged, riddled with small holes and fissures. Porosity is increasing, Thorne mumbles into his personal recorder. We are seeing pockets of gang, methane, sulfur, and something else. Unknown organic compounds. I'm watching the external cameras. The floodlights create a tunnel of light in an infinite universe of black. Hold on, I say. Camera 2, pan left. Graves adjusts the joystick. Camera 2 swivels. There, I point. Rewind 5 seconds. Freeze frame. On the monitor, a blurry image freezes. It's a fissure in the shaft wall, maybe a meter wide. Just a crack in the rock. But inside the crack, is that equipment? Miller asks, squinting. It is. Jammed deep into the fissure, encrusted with rock and minerals, is a metal object. It looks like a drill bit, a massive industrial drill bit, twisted and snapped like a twig. That's Soviet tech, Hideo says softly. That's a Uralmash 4E drill head from the Kola project. That's impossible, Thorne says. The Kola borehole is in Russia. We are in Alaska. That's thousands of miles away. I know what I'm looking at, Doc, Hideo insists. I studied their schematics. That is a Russian drill bit. I stare at the screen. Hideo is right. The Cyrillic lettering is barely visible under the rust. But Thorne is also right. Geographically, it makes no sense. Unless the tunnel systems down here are connected. Unless the cavity we are heading toward isn't just a pocket under Alaska. Unless it's a global network. A honeycomb of hollows that spans the entire crust. If that's a Soviet drill, I say slowly, how did it get here? And why is it bent at a 90-degree angle? Before anyone can answer, a sound echoes through the hull. Clang. It comes from outside. Something hit the capsule. Debris? Graves asks, checking the sensors. No impact damage? Clang. Louder this time. It didn't sound like a rock falling. It sounded like metal striking metal. Deliberate. Rhythmic. Clang. 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 Someone is knocking, Miller whispers. He raises his rifle, aiming it at the solid steel door of the hatch. Commander, someone is knocking on the damn door. Don't be stupid, Sergeant, I snap. We are 7 clicks underground. The pressure out there is 700 atmospheres. Nothing can live out there, nothing can knock. But I hear it too. It's coming from the lower airlock assembly. Clang, scritch, scratch. The knocking turns into scratching. The sound of something sharp dragging across the titanium alloy. It sounds like a diamond cutter, or a claw. Turn on the lower floodlights, I order. Camera 4, look down. The monitor flickers to life. We are looking at the bottom of the capsule. The black void beneath us. There is nothing there. Just the empty shaft stretching down into darkness. See, I say, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Nothing, just acoustic echoes. The cable vibrating against the shaft walls. Commander, Hideo says, his voice trembling. Look at the edge of the light, at the bottom of the screen. I look closer, at the very periphery of the floodlight's reach, where the light fades into shadow. Movement, not falling rocks, not water. Shadows, dozens of them, clinging to the walls of the shaft. They are roughly human-sized, but they are moving. Wrong. They are scuttling, climbing up the vertical walls toward us. They are fast, jerky, like stop-motion animation spiders. As the light touches them, they freeze. They flatten themselves against the rock, blending in perfectly. Camouflage. They are following us, Thorne whispers. No, they aren't following. He points to the top of the screen. They are hurting us. Suddenly, the scratching stops. The radio static clears for a split second, and a voice comes through. It's not control, it's not English, and it's not Russian. It sounds like a child trying to speak with a throat full of gravel. Deeper, the voice hisses. Come, deeper. Then the static returns. I look at Miller. He has safety off his weapon. His eyes are wide, locked on the door. Graves, I say, my voice low and dangerous. Increase speed, maximum descent. But the structural integrity? Maximum speed, I roar. We need to get to the cavity. We need open space because whatever is in this shaft with us, it's getting closer. We drop like a stone. The G-force pushes us into our seats. But even over the roar of the wind and the whine of the winch, I can still hear it. The scratching. It's moving up the sides of the capsule. It's trying to find a way in. 10 kilometers. We have passed the theoretical limit of the crust. We are now intruders in a place where physics seems to operate on a delay. The scratching on the hull stopped 1,000 meters ago. I don't know if we outran them or if they just stopped to watch us fall, but the silence that replaced them is worse. It is the silence of a predator holding its breath before the strike. Approaching the breach point, Graves announces. His voice is flat, robotic. He's running on adrenaline fumes. Sonar indicates the shaft opens up in 3, 2, 1. Whoosh! The sensation is immediate. The claustrophobic pressure of the shaft walls vanishes. The sound of the winch cable scraping against rocks stops. The capsule is no longer descending through a tunnel. We are floating in open space. External floodlights to maximum, I order. Let's see where we are. Graves flips the toggles. The high-intensity halogen beams, capable of illuminating a football stadium, stab into the darkness. They don't hit a wall. They don't hit a floor. They hit nothing. The light stretches out for a mile and fades into the gloom. We are hanging suspended in a void so massive that our sensors can't find the boundaries. The altimeter spins wildly. The laser rangefinders are returning error codes. Infinity. Dear God, Thorne whispers. He is pressed against the viewport, his breath fogging the glass. It's not a pocket. It's an ocean of air. We descend slowly through the void. As my eyes adjust to the darkness beyond the lights, I start to see shapes in the distance. Massive, towering pillars rising from the depths, stretching up into the black ceiling, miles above. Are those stalactites? Miller asks, squinting at the monitor. Zoom in, I command. The camera focuses on the nearest pillar. It's thick, maybe the width of a skyscraper, but it's not made of stone. It's gray, fibrous, and twisting. It pulses with a slow, bioluminescent rhythm, faint blue veins throbbing under a translucent surface. That's not stone, Thorne says, his voice shaking with a mix of horror and scientific ecstasy. That's organic matter. Commander, that looks like muscle fiber. I stare at the screen. He's right. The pillar looks like a bundle of exposed nerves and muscle, petrified and magnified to a geological scale. And look there, Hideo points to another screen. The atmosphere. We are passing through clouds, but they aren't water vapor. They are thick, yellow spores drifting in the stagnant air. As the capsule moves through them, they stick to the glass, glowing faintly. Atmospheric analysis, I bark. High concentrations of sulfur, Graves reads from the console. Methane and hemoglobin? He pauses, tapping the gauge. That can't be right. The sensors are detecting aerosolized blood cells in the air. I feel a wave of nausea. We aren't just underground. We are inside something. Commander, Miller yells, snapping me back to reality. Movement, 3 o'clock. I spin around. On the starboard monitor, something is flying. It's not a bat. It's not a bird. It's large, maybe the size of a hang glider. It moves with a jerky, fluttering motion. It dives through the light beam, shrieking, scree. The sound penetrates the hull. It sounds like tearing metal. Did you see it? Miller is hyperventilating. It had a face. Sarge, I swear to God, it had a human face. Calm down, Miller. I grab his shoulder. It was a shadow, a trick of the light. It looked like Kowalski, Miller whispers, staring at me with wide, crazy eyes. From my old unit. He died in Panama, but I just saw him flying out there. Oxygen toxicity, Thorne mutters, checking the life support. We are too deep. Nitrogen narcosis, hallucinations. It wasn't a hallucination, Miller screams, shoving my hand away. He raises his rifle toward the viewport. Stand down, Sergeant. I draw my sidearm. The tension in the capsule snaps tight. We are 10 kilometers down, suspended by a wire, surrounded by flying nightmares, and my heavy weapons specialist is losing his mind. Look, Hideo says calmly, too calmly. We are approaching the floor. I look down. The abyss is ending. The floodlights reveal a landscape that defies logic. It looks like a ruined city, but melted. Structures that might have been buildings or might have been giant rib cages are scattered across a floor covered in thick black moss. And in the center of the ruins is the source of the signal, a massive, perfectly circular hole in the ground of the cavity, a hole within the hole, and it is glowing with a sick, purple light. That's it, Thorne says. Project Tartarus, the secondary layer. Set us down, I order, keeping one eye on Miller. Put us down on that ridge and pray the ground is solid. Log entry, 05. Depth, 12,000 meters. Status, touchdown. The landing was not smooth. The Icarus capsule didn't land on rock. It landed on something soft. When the landing struts made contact, there was no metallic clank. There was a wet, squelching thud. The capsule sank a few feet into the surface before stabilizing. It felt like landing in mud or flesh. Engine shut down, Graves announces. Winch disengaged. We are on the ground, though. Silence returns, but it's different now. The thrumming sound, the heartbeat, is so loud it vibrates my chest cavity. Thump, thump, thump. It's slow, maybe 4 beats per minute, but each beat shakes the entire capsule like a mild earthquake. Environmental suit check, I order. We need to go out there. Out there, Miller laughs, a high, hysterical giggle. You want to go out there? Did you see the things in the air? They had faces, Commander. They had faces. Get a grip, soldier. I slam him against the wall. We have a mission. We deploy the sensor probe, we take samples, and we leave. You are a United States Marine. Act like one. Miller nods slowly, swallowing hard. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Thorne is already in his hazmat suit, clutching his sample kit like a lifeline. The air is toxic, he says, but the pressure is surprisingly stable. It's equalized. We won't implode if we open the hatch. I suit up. The heavy rubber of the suit feels like a coffin. I grab my M16, checking the magazine. Depleted uranium. I hope it's enough. Graves, Hideo, you stay in the capsule. Keep the engines warm. If I give the signal, you winch us up. Do not wait for us. Understood, Commander, Hideo says, chambering around in his shotgun. I'll watch the door. I cycle the airlock. The outer door hisses open. The smell hits me even through the filters of my mask. It's the smell of a slaughterhouse that has been closed for 1,000 years. Rotting copper, sulfur, and old stale blood. I step out onto the surface. My boots sink into the black moss. It feels spongy. I shine my tactical light at the ground. Don't look too closely at the moss, Thorne warns over the comms. I look anyway. The moss isn't plant life. It's hair. Billions of tiny black strands of coarse hair growing out of the ground, and crawling through the hair are things that look like white ticks the size of dinner plates. I kick one away. It bursts with a sickening pop, spraying yellow fluid. Eyes up, I command. Head for the ridge. We walk toward the glowing purple pit in the distance. The landscape is a nightmare of biology and geology fused together. We pass a boulder that looks like a calcified skull. We pass pools of steaming black liquid that bubble and hiss. Commander, Thorne stops. He is aiming his scanner at a structure nearby. It looks like a pillar of black obsidian. What is it? This isn't natural, Thorne says, his voice trembling. Look at the markings. I shine my light on the pillar. Carved into the black stone or bone are symbols. They aren't random scratches. They are geometric, precise. Runes, I ask? No, Thorne says. Equations. This is math, but it's wrong. The geometry is non-Euclidean. Just looking at it makes my eyes hurt. Someone was here before us, Miller whispers. He is scanning the darkness with his rifle light. Russians? No human carved this, Thorne says. Carbon dating on this structure. The scanner is reading it as 2 million years old. Suddenly a sound cuts through the darkness. It's not the heartbeat. It's a voice. It's coming from the purple pit. Help me. It's faint, distorted, echoing, but it's English. Miller freezes. Did you hear that? It's a radio echo, I say. Atmospheric bounce. James, my blood runs cold. That's my name. James, it's cold down here. I know that voice. I left that voice in a burning chopper in Saigon 20 years ago. It's my co-pilot. It's a trick, I growl, raising my weapon. It's the gas. It's the toxicity. No, Miller says, stepping forward, lowering his rifle. That's not a trick. That's my brother. I hear him. He's calling me. Miller, hold position, I shout, but he's not listening. He starts walking toward the purple pit, walking faster, then running. Miller, he sprints toward the edge of the glowing abyss. I'm coming, Danny. I'm coming. Hideo, Graves, I yell into the comms. Cover fire. Target the... Target whatever's making that sound. But from the capsule, I hear only screaming. They're inside, Hideo is yelling. They came through the vents. They're inside the suits. Oh God, they're eating. Static. Then the floodlights on the capsule go out. We are 12 kilometers down. My ship is compromised. My soldier is running into a pit of madness. And I am standing in a field of hair, aiming a gun at the darkness. And from the dark, something starts to laugh. I made a choice. It's the kind of choice they don't teach you in officer candidate school. Miller was running into the dark, chasing ghosts. But my ship, my only ticket out of this hellhole, was under attack. The screaming over the comms had stopped, replaced by a wet, slurping static that made my stomach turn. "Thorn, with me!" I yelled, spinning around and sprinting back toward the Icarus capsule. "Leave Miller. We need to secure the ship." Thorn hesitated, looking at the darkness where Miller had vanished, then at me. Survival instinct won. He turned and ran alongside me, his hazmat suit clumsy and heavy on the spongy ground. We reached the capsule in 2 minutes. It looked like a beached whale carcass. The main floodlights were dead. The only illumination came from the emergency strobes inside, casting frantic, pulsing red flashes through the viewport. And then I saw them. The ticks. The white parasites. They weren't just on the ground anymore. They were swarming the hull of the capsule. Thousands of them. They looked like a moving carpet of pale, writhing limbs. They were clustering around the air vents, around the door seals, chewing. I could hear it over the roar of my own breathing. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They were eating the titanium alloy. "Get back!" I shouted to Thorn. I raised my M16 and flipped the selector to full auto. "Clear the door!" I squeezed the trigger. The depleted uranium rounds tore through the mass of parasites, exploding them into showers of yellow ichor. They didn't scream, they just popped. But for every 10 I killed, 20 more crawled up from the black moss to take their place. I fought my way to the airlock. "Hideo, Graves, open the damn door!" No answer. I punched the manual override code into the keypad. The hydraulic seals hissed, a weak, dying sound, and the door slid open. I wish it hadn't. The interior of the Icarus was painted red, not from the lights, from blood. The cabin pressure had equalized with the outside, meaning the hull had been breached long before I opened the door. The air inside was thick with the smell of sulfur and copper. Lieutenant Graves was still in the pilot's seat, or at least his torso was. He was slumped forward over the console. His helmet was shattered. And inside his suit, the suit was moving. It was rippling. I stepped closer, my weapon raised. "Graves?" He turned his head slowly, but he didn't have a face anymore. His visor was gone, and latched onto his face was one of the white ticks. It had dug in deep. Its legs were wrapped around the back of his head, and its proboscis was buried in his eye socket. And the worst part? Graves was still conscious. His remaining eye locked onto mine. His mouth opened, trying to form words, but only a gurgle of blood came out. He raised a shaking hand and pointed, not at me, Behin, but at the ceiling. I looked up. The ceiling of the capsule was gone. The parasites had eaten through the roof mechanism, and the winch cable, the steel tether that connected us to the surface, to sunlight, to home, was gone. It hadn't snapped under tension. It had been severed, gnawed through. "Commander," Thorn whispered from the doorway. He was staring at the floor. Corporal Hideo wasn't there. His shotgun was on the deck, twisted like a pretzel. But there was a drag mark, a wide smear of blood leading from the pilot's seat out the back of the capsule, through a hole chewed in the rear bulkhead. They hadn't just killed Hideo, they had taken him. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. "This isn't a ship anymore, it's a dinner plate." "The winch is gone," Thorn stammered, panic rising in his voice. "We're trapped. We're buried alive." "Grab the supplies," I ordered, grabbing a satchel and stuffing it with extra magazines, flares, and a medical kit. "Grab the oxygen scrubbers if you can carry them. We are leaving." "Leaving to go where?" Thorn screamed. "There is nowhere to go." I grabbed him by the faceplate of his suit and slammed him against the wall. "Listen to me, the ship is dead. If we stay here, those things will eat through our suits in 10 minutes. We have one option. We find Miller, we find where he went, and we find a defensible position." "Miller went to the pit," Thorn whimpered, "to the purple light." "Then that's where we're going," I said, shoving him toward the door. "Move." I took one last look at Graves. He was twitching now. The parasite was pulsing, pumping something into his brain. I raised my pistol. I'm sorry, son, I whispered. Bang! I didn't wait to see him slump. I turned and ran back into the dark, leaving the tomb of the Icarus behind. We were on foot now, 12 kilometers down, two men against a planet that wanted to digest us. We have been walking for an hour, or maybe a day. Time doesn't work down here. My watch stopped ticking 20 minutes ago. The second hand is just vibrating in place, caught in some magnetic anomaly. We are following Miller's boot prints in the black moss. They are easy to track. He wasn't walking, he was running, stumbling. There are places where he fell, dragging his hands through the hair-like grass, leaving deep gouges. The landscape is changing as we get closer to the purple glow. The ruins are getting denser. Thorn calls it the City of Bone. Towering spires of calcified white rock rise up around us, twisting into shapes that look like vertebrae. We are walking through a canyon made of giant fossilized ribs. The ground is harder here. The moss gives way to a surface that looks like skin. Leathery, pale, and warm to the touch through my boots. And the sound, the heartbeat, has changed. It's no longer just a thump. It's a melody, a low, droning hum that seems to come from everywhere at once. It vibrates in my teeth. It resonates in the fluid of my inner ear. It makes me feel dizzy, euphoric, and terrified all at the same time. Do you hear the singing? Thorn asks. He has stopped checking his scanner. He is just walking, staring straight ahead with a glazed look in his eyes. It's not singing, Thorn, I snap, checking our 6. It's acoustic resonance. Wind moving through the caves. No, Thorn smiles, a disturbingly peaceful smile. It's a lullaby. It's the earth singing to her children. Snap out of it. I shove him forward. Keep moving. We crest a ridge of bone and look down. There it is, the purple pit, the secondary layer. It's not just a hole, it is a coliseum, a massive circular depression, easily 5 miles wide. The walls slope down steeply, leading to a central aperture that glows with that sick, violet radiation. And standing at the very edge of the aperture is a tiny figure. Miller, I shout. My voice echoes across the vast chamber. But the echo is wrong. Instead of Miller, the echo comes back as join us. I raise my binoculars. Miller is standing with his arms spread wide, like a preacher addressing a congregation. He has taken off his helmet. He breached containment, Thorn gasps. The air! Why isn't he dead? Miller turns around slowly. Even from 300 yards away, I can see something is wrong. He isn't choking. He isn't gasping for air. He is smiling. But his eyes. Through the binoculars, I see that his eyes are gone. In their place are 2 small, glowing purple lights. And his skin, it's moving. Veins are pulsing black under the surface of his face, shifting and rearranging themselves. Miller, get away from the edge, I scream, starting to run down the slope. Miller looks at me, and then he speaks. He doesn't shout, but his voice booms across the distance as if he is plugged into a stadium PA system. Commander, Miller's voice says, but underneath it, there are 1,000 other voices whispering. It's beautiful down here. We were wrong. It's not hell. It's a womb. Miller, listen to me. I skid to a halt 50 yards from him. We need to leave. We can find another way. Leave? Miller laughs. The sound is like rocks grinding together. Why would I leave? I can hear them all now. The ones who came before, the Russians, the miners, they are all here. In the walls. He points to the pit. Do you want to hear the truth, Commander? Do you want to know what the broadcast is? He leans back. He is teetering on the edge of the abyss. Don't do it! I raise my rifle, aiming at his leg. Step back or I shoot. The broadcast, Miller says, tears of black oil streaming down his face, is a dinner bell. He steps back. He doesn't scream as he falls. He just vanishes into the purple light. I run to the edge. I look down. The pit isn't empty. The light illuminates something massive moving deep below. A shifting, writhing mass of biomass, eyes, mouths, limbs, billions of tons of flesh, churning like a slow ocean. And as Miller falls toward it, the mass rises to meet him. My God, Thorn whispers, standing beside me. He has taken off his helmet too. It's not a cavity, it's a stomach. I grab Thorn before he can jump. Don't you dare, put your helmet back on. But don't you hear it, James? Thorn looks at me, tears streaming down his face. It's hungry. It's been hungry for so long. I look at the pit. The city of bone around us isn't ruins. It's the skeletal remains of something that the planet consumed millions of years ago. And where are the fresh meal? The humming gets louder. It turns into a shriek. The pit is waking up. And then I see them coming up the walls of the pit. Not the ticks, not the flyers. Humanoid shapes, pale, eyeless, wearing tattered rags of Soviet uniforms. The Russians didn't leave. They are still here and they are climbing up to greet us. We are running again. The creatures climbing out of the purple pit aren't fast, but there are hundreds of them. They move with a unified, jerky rhythm, like puppets controlled by a single twitching hand. "Don't look at them," I shout at Thorn, grabbing his harness and dragging him over a ridge of calcified bone. "Keep your eyes on the ground. Move." But I looked. I looked long enough to see the patches on their rotting uniforms. CCCP, the hammer and sickle. These aren't monsters native to this depth. These are men, or they used to be. They are the lost crew of the Kola super deep borehole. History says they packed up and went home in 1989. History is a lie. They didn't stop drilling. They broke through, and they came down here to see what they had found. And the pit kept them. Crack thump, a shot rings out from behind us. But it's not gunfire, it's a harpoon. A jagged spear made of black bone slams into the ground inches from my boot. I spin around, raising my rifle. 3 of the entities have crested the ridge. They are wearing tattered Soviet pressure suits, fused to their skin. Their helmets are shattered, revealing faces that are translucent and pale. I can see the veins pulsing black underneath. I can see the parasites crawling inside their cheeks. One of them, the leader, raises a modified industrial rivet gun. "Open fire!" I scream. I squeeze the trigger. The M16 bucks in my hands. The depleted uranium rounds hit the leader in the chest. They punch through the rotten suit and the flesh beneath. He doesn't fall. He doesn't even flinch. The rounds pass straight through him, blowing out chunks of black ichor, but he keeps walking. It's like shooting into a block of ballistics gel. There are no organs left to damage, no heart to stop. They are just husks. "Join the hole," the leader gurgles. The voice isn't coming from his mouth. It's vibrating from his chest cavity. He raises the rivet gun again. I aim for the head. Bam! The round takes the top of his skull off. Finally, the puppet strings are cut. He drops to his knees and collapses into a pile of wet rags and bone. "Headshots!" I yell. "Thorn, run! I'll hold them off." "I can't!" Thorn is hyperventilating. He's fallen to his knees, staring at a structure in the distance. "Commander, look! Over there!" I glance to my left. Nestled against the wall of the giant cavern, half buried in the black moss, is a building. It's a modular habitat, metallic, boxy, rusty. It looks like a lunar land, but built with brutalist Soviet architecture. "A forward operating base," I whisper. They established a base. "Shelter!" Thorn scrambles up and starts sprinting toward the structure. I fire 3 more bursts, dropping 2 more of the approaching Russians, and then I sprint after Thorn. We reach the airlock of the habitat. It's covered in the white ticks, but the door looks intact. I spin the manual wheel. It's rusted shut. "Help me," I grunt. Thorn grabs the wheel. Together, we heave. Screech! The metal groans and the door pops open. We tumble inside, slamming it shut behind us and spinning the locking wheel just as a heavy body slams against the glass of the viewport. We are inside. The habitat is dark, lit only by the flickering emergency power of a dying nuclear battery. The air inside is stale, but breathable. I turn on my tactical light. The room is filled with scientific equipment, seismographs, biological sample jars, and in the corner, a radio array, a massive military-grade transmitter. "Thorn, check the radio," I order, checking the ammo count. "See if it still has power. We need to boost the signal. We need to warn the surface." But Thorn isn't looking at the radio. He is looking at the desk in the center of the room. There is a man sitting there. He is wearing a captain's uniform. He has been dead for a long time. His skin is mummified, stretched tight over his skull. He has a pistol in one hand and a tape recorder in the other. But the most disturbing thing is what is on the desk in front of him. It's a map of the Earth's core. But it's not a geological map. It's an anatomical chart. "Commander," Thorn whispers, picking up the map. His hands are shaking so hard the paper rattles. "This isn't a cave system. Look at the labels." I shine my light on the Cyrillic text. I can't read Russian, but I recognize the diagrams. The shaft we came down, It's labeled esophagus. The purple pit, stomach. The tunnels branching out, veins. The planet, Thorne says, his voice cracking. It's not a rock, James. It's an organism. A biological entity the size of a world. And we are just bacteria. Outside, the banging on the door gets louder. They are bringing tools. They are going to cut their way in. The habitat is shaking. The hollow men outside are using a plasma cutter on the hinges. Sparks are flying across the room, illuminating the mummified corpse of the Soviet captain. The radio is dead, Thorne says, dropping the receiver. The antenna was chewed off years ago. Then we find another way, I say, scanning the room. My eyes land on a schematic pinned to the wall behind the dead captain. It shows the habitat layout, but it shows something else attached to the rear of the structure. A vertical tube, a secondary shaft. What is that? I point. Thorne squints at the blueprint. It looks like an escape mechanism, a pressurized ascender, a lifeboat designed to shoot back up to the surface using solid fuel rockets. Does it work? It's Russian tech from the 80s, Thorne laughs hysterically. It probably never worked. It's our only chance, and I say, check the rear airlock. Clang, the main door buckles. A hand, a pale, wet hand, reaches through the gap. Go! I shove Thorne toward the back of the room. We scramble through a narrow corridor filled with hanging wires and debris. At the end, there is a heavy circular hatch labeled Vostok 1. I spin the wheel. It opens smoothly. Inside, there is a small vertical capsule, cramped. Just enough room for two men standing shoulder to shoulder. It sits on a launch rail that disappears up into a drilled shaft in the cavern ceiling. Get in, I tell Thorne. He climbs in. I start to follow, but then I stop. I look back at the corridor. The main door has failed. I can hear them pouring into the habitat. The shrieking, the wet footsteps. If we both get in, the extra weight might be too much for the old rockets, and someone needs to manually engage the launch sequence from the external console. The remote trigger is smashed. I look at Thorne. He is staring at me, terrified. He knows. James, he whispers, don't. Someone has to push the button, Eris, I say, using his first name for the first time. And you're the civilian. You have the data. You have the map. You need to tell them what this is. I can't go back alone, he cries. They won't believe me. Make them believe you. I hand him the tape recorder from the dead captain's desk. Well, take this. I grab the handle of the hatch and slam it shut. I lock it from the outside. Commander, open the door. Thorne is pounding on the glass. I turn to the control panel on the wall. It's covered in dust. I wipe it off. A big red button under a plastic guard. Launch. The sounds of the hollow men are right behind me now. I can smell them. The rot. The sulfur. I pull my sidearm. I have 3 bullets left. Good luck, Doc, I whisper. I smash the plastic guard and punch the launch button. Whoosh! The rockets ignite with a deafening roar. The floor shakes. The capsule shoots up the shaft like a bullet, leaving a trail of fire and smoke. I watch it go. Then I turn around. They are here. 10 of them, standing in the doorway of the corridor. The leader, the one I shot, is back on his feet, his head half gone. Beside him is Miller. Miller looks peaceful. His purple eyes are glowing. Commander, Miller says, why did you send him away? We just wanted to show you the heart. I raise my pistol. I've seen enough, I say. I fire 2 shots. One hits Miller, one hits the leader. They don't stop. They just step closer. I put under my own chin. Click. Empty. Miller smiles. He reaches out a hand. His fingers are long, too long. They touch my face. His skin burns like acid. Don't be afraid, Miller whispers. The digestion is the beginning of rebirth. Audio log begins with a long period of static. Then a wet, breathing sound. I don't know if this is recording. The suit is part of me now. My name was James Vance. I was a commander. I am still here. I didn't die. I wish I had died. They didn't eat me, not in the way you think. They integrated me. I am sitting in the habitat, but the walls are breathing. The metal has turned to skin. The radio? I fixed the radio. I used my own nerves to bridge the circuits. Can you hear me? Noradu, if you are listening, stop looking for us. Thorne, if you made it to the surface, burn the data. Burn the maps. Do not let them drill again. We thought we were exploring a cave. We were popping a pimple on the face of the god, and now it knows you are there. Before we drilled, it was asleep. The heartbeat was slow, but we woke it up. We poked it with a needle, and now it's agitated. The stomach is churning, the acid is rising. Miller is here with me. He says hello. He says the surface is too cold. He says you should all come down here. It's warm. It's so warm. I can feel the pulse of the planet in my blood. It's rewriting my DNA. It's telling me things. History, not human history, deep history. It was here before the dinosaurs, before the oceans. It waited. It slept. And now, it's hungry. It's not going to stay down here anymore. I can feel the tremors starting. Can you feel them up there? The earthquakes? That's not tectonic plates shifting. That's the beast stretching. It's coming up the shaft. It's using the hole we made. I am going to sign off now. My fingers are fusing together. I can't hold the button much longer. Do not send a rescue team. Do not send a nuke. Just run. Run to the mountains. Run to the moon. It doesn't matter. The ground is not safe. This is Delta One. Signing off. The audio ends with a sound that is not human. It is a scream, but it sounds like tectonic plates grinding together. Then silence. The audio log you just heard was recovered from an encrypted buoy that surfaced in the Arctic Ocean in 1991. Dr. Eris Thorne was never found. The escape capsule was never recovered. The U.S. Navy listed the entire Delta team as lost at sea during a classified training exercise. Project Tartarus was officially shut down. The site in Alaska was leveled. They poured 10,000 tons of concrete into the borehole. They capped it with a lead seal 3 meters thick. But concrete cracks. In 2020, seismologists in Alaska detected a new swarm of earthquakes, deep quakes that are 12 kilometers down. They say it's just the Brooks Range settling. They say it's natural geological activity. But if you look at the waveforms, if you slow them down, they don't look like random friction. They look like a heartbeat, and it's getting faster. The next time you are standing outside and you feel the ground tremble beneath your feet, ask yourself, is it an earthquake? Or is something moving in the basement? We dug too deep. We rang the dinner bell, and now we are just waiting for the landlord to come collect the rent. I am Captain Nightwhisper. Walk lightly, and for God's sake, stop digging. Good night. They call him a madman. The Navy calls him a liar. History calls him a myth. His name was Carl Allen, but the world remembers him by the name he signed at the bottom of his frantic, terrified letters: Carlos Allende. In 1955, a package arrived on the desk of a scientist named Morris Jessup. Inside that package was not just a stack of papers. It was a confession. It was a warning written in different colored inks, with sentences that ran off the page, scrawled by a hand that was shaking with adrenaline and fear. Allende claimed he was there. He claimed he was standing on the deck of the merchant ship SS Andrew Forsyth in October of 1943. He claimed he was watching the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard through a pair of high-powered binoculars when the United States Navy decided to break the laws of physics. We have all heard the legends, the story of the USS Eldridge, the ship that was supposed to turn invisible to radar. The experiment that went wrong, Pop culture tells us it was a time travel accident. Movies tell us it was a teleportation error. But they always leave out the visceral, biological horror of what actually happened on that deck. Tonight, we are not reading the sanitized version. We are not reading the official denial from the Office of Naval Research. We are reading the witness testimony. Because Carlos Allende didn't just see a ship disappear into thin air. He saw what happened when it came back. He saw the cost of playing God. He saw men who were no longer men. He saw flesh merged with the steel. He saw sailors frozen in time, trapped in a single second of agony that lasted for eternity. Before we open this file, I need you to understand one thing. This is not just a ghost story. This is a glimpse into a reality that is sitting right next to ours, separated only by a thin veil of electromagnetic stability. And once you tear that veil, you can never truly sew it back together. My name is Captain Nightwhisper. Turn off the lights, check your surroundings, make sure the walls of your room feel solid. Because where we are going tonight, solid matter is just a suggestion. Let's go back to 1943, to the smell of ozone and the green fog. October 28, 1943. The first thing you noticed wasn't the ship, it was the air. The Philadelphia harbor usually smelled of diesel fuel, rotting fish, and the salt of the Atlantic. But on that day, the air tasted like pennies. It was a metallic, bitter taste that coated the back of your throat and made your fillings ache. It was the smell of ozone, but multiplied by 1,000. It was the smell of a thunderstorm that was trapped inside a bottle, waiting to break the glass. I was a deckhand on the SS Andrew Furuseth. We were docked adjacent to the target vessel, the USS Eldridge. To the untrained eye, she looked like a standard cannon-class destroyer escort. Gray paint, gun turrets, radar mast. But if you looked closer, if you looked at her the way a predator looks at prey, you could see the modifications. Massive copper cables were wrapped around the hull of the ship. They ran lengthwise from bow to stern, coiling back on themselves like snakes. They weren't just standard degaussing cables used to repel magnetic mines. These were thick, pulsating veins of conductive metal hooked up to generators that were far too large for a ship of that size. I stood on the fantail of my ship, leaning against the railing. The water in the harbor was choppy, gray and cold. But around the Eldridge, the water looked different. It looked oily. It wasn't moving with the tide, it was vibrating, a low-frequency tremor that created tiny concentric rings rippling out from the hull. I remember seeing the men on the dock. Men in suits, not uniforms. Scientists. I saw a man who looked like Einstein, or at least someone who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders like him. They were checking clipboards. They were arguing, pointing at the sky, then pointing at the generators. There was a sense of urgency in their movements, a panic that they were trying to hide behind professional detachment. The crew of the Eldridge, they were just kids. Most of them were fresh out of boot camp. They were standing on the deck, smoking cigarettes, joking with each other. They had no idea. They thought this was just another drill. They thought they were testing a new radar jammer. They didn't know they were standing inside the chamber of a loaded gun. At 1600 hours, the order came down. Initiate the field. That's when the sound started. It wasn't a mechanical sound. It wasn't the roar of an engine. It was a whine, a high-pitched, piercing whine that you didn't hear with your ears. You felt it in your bones. It started deep in your stomach and worked its way up to your skull. The seagulls that had been circling the harbor suddenly stopped screaming. They dropped out of the sky, dead, just like that. Dozens of birds falling into the water like stones. Their nervous systems had been overloaded before the experiment even reached full power. I grabbed the railing, my knuckles turned white. The metal of my own ship felt hot to the touch. The static electricity in the air was building up so fast that the hair on my arm stood straight up. Sparks began to dance along the anchor chains. Blue, arcing tendrils of energy that snapped and hissed. The Eldridge began to blur. It wasn't disappearing. Not yet. It was shimmering, like looking at a highway on a scorching hot summer day. The heat haze distortion. The lines of the ship became wavy. The mast bent at an impossible angle and then snapped back. The hull seemed to expand and contract like the ship was breathing, like it was inhaling the space around it. I brought my binoculars up to my eyes. My hands were shaking. Through the lenses, I saw a sailor on the Eldridge. He was looking at his feet. He was stomping his boot on the deck over and over again. At first, I thought he was trying to put out a fire. But then I zoomed in. He wasn't stomping out a fire. He was trying to pull his boot free. The steel deck had become soft, like mud, and he was sinking into it. The generators ramped up to full power. The whine became a scream. And then the green fog arrived. It didn't roll in from the sea. It exploded out of the molecules of the air itself. A radioactive, glowing, sick green mist that swallowed the ship whole, and the world held its breath. I want you to imagine a color you have never seen before. We have words for green. We think of grass or emeralds or the leaves of a tree. But the mist that began to bleed out of the air around the USS Eldridge was none of those. It was a chemical green, a dead green. It was the color of radiation burns on an old film reel. It glowed with its own internal luminescence, casting a sick, pale light onto the dark water of the harbor. The generators were screaming now. That high-pitched whine had become a physical force. I saw men on the dock covering their ears, falling to their knees. The fillings in my teeth were vibrating so hard I thought they would shatter. The metal railing of my ship was now too hot to touch. The induction field was expanding, reaching out, tasting the world around it. Then the fog moved. It didn't behave like weather. There was no wind to push it. It crawled. It slithered over the surface of the water like a blanket made of smoke. It rose up the sides of the destroyer, clinging to the steel plates, wrapping around the gun turrets, choking the mast. I focused my binoculars on the bridge of the Eldridge. I needed to see the captain. I needed to see someone in charge. What I saw stopped my heart. The fog wasn't just covering the ship, it was passing through it. I saw a sailor standing near the bow. He was holding onto a lifeline. As the green mist washed over him, he didn't cough, he didn't choke, he just faded. I could see the outline of his body, but inside the outline, I could see the steel bulkhead behind him. He was becoming transparent. He was becoming a ghost while he was still alive. I watched him lift his hand to his face. I saw the terror in his eyes. He was screaming, his mouth wide open, but no sound was coming out. The sound waves were being swallowed by the field. He looked at his own arm, and I saw him realize that his flesh was turning into glass. He tried to run, but his feet passed right through the deck. He stumbled, falling into the floor, his knees sinking into the solid steel as if it were quicksand. The ship began to pulse. It was phasing in and out of reality. 1 second, it was solid, 1,000 tons of warship. The next second, it was a sketch, a wireframe drawing made of green light. I heard a sound then, a sound that wasn't the generators. It sounded like fabric tearing, like a massive canvas sail being ripped in half by a storm. Rip. It was the sound of the universe breaking. The air pressure dropped instantly. My ears popped painfully. The water around the hull began to boil, not from heat but from the sudden vacuum. The fog swirled faster, creating a vortex, a cyclone of green energy that spun around the ship faster and faster until the Eldridge was just a blur, a smudge on the lens of reality. And then the light intensified. A flash of blue-white electricity arced from the top of the mast to the water. It was blinding. I threw my arm up to cover my eyes. When I looked back, the fog was settling, the water was calming, and the USS Eldridge was gone. Silence. That is the only word for it. Absolute, heavy, suffocating silence. The generators had stopped whining, the seagulls were dead, the men on the dock were frozen, staring at the empty space where a destroyer had been anchored 10 seconds ago. But it wasn't just empty. If a ship leaves a harbor, there is water left behind. There are waves. There is a wake. But looking at the spot where the Eldridge had been was like looking at a wound in the world that refused to bleed. There was a depression in the water, a massive hull-shaped indentation in the Atlantic Ocean. The water stood up on all sides, held back by an invisible wall. It was as if the ship was still there, pushing the water aside, but we just couldn't see it. The Navy report, the one they released years later to debunk my letters, claimed the ship had been teleported to Norfolk, Virginia. They said it appeared there for a few minutes and then came back. They called it a teleportation success. They are lying. The ship didn't go to Norfolk. I know this because I was looking at the void, and the void was looking back. I kept my binoculars trained on that empty hole in the water. The air above it was shimmering, like a mirage, and inside that shimmer, I saw shapes. Not solid shapes, shadows, movements. It looked like the green fog was still there, trapped in a layer of reality just beneath ours. I saw twisting forms, I saw things that looked like tentacles, or maybe vast geometric structures that didn't make sense to the human eye. They were moving in the space where the crew should have been. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, a deep, primal sickness. It wasn't seasickness, it was the feeling of being near something that violates the laws of nature. My brain couldn't process the emptiness. I started to get a headache, a sharp pain right behind my eyes. I wasn't the only one. On the dock, I saw the scientists retreating. The man who looked like Einstein was rubbing his temples, looking pale. He knew. He knew that they hadn't just moved a ship from point A to point B. They had pushed a ship outside of the timeline. They had dunked it into the abyss, like dipping a teabag into water. And now they were just waiting to see what flavor the water would turn. For 15 minutes, we stared at nothing. 15 minutes of dead silence. 15 minutes of the water refusing to fill the hole. And then, the smell returned. That copper taste, that ozone stench. It came back 10 times stronger than before. The air turned yellow. The invisible wall holding back the water began to crackle with static electricity. The universe was rejecting the intruder. It was spitting the eldritch back out. But as the air began to thicken and the outline of the ship started to materialize again in the mist, I realized something terrifying. The ship that left was gray steel. The ship that was coming back was glowing red. It was coming back hot. It was coming back wrong. When the eldritch returned, the silence didn't last. It was broken by a sound that I hope you never have to hear. It was the sound of 300 men screaming at once. The ship materialized instantly. One moment there was a hole in the water, and the next, the displacement of air created a thunderclap that shook the fillings in my teeth. The green fog dissipated quickly, retreating into the cracks of the deck, sinking back into the steel. I grabbed my kit bag, I ran down the gangplank of the Furuseth and sprinted toward the destroyer. I wasn't the only one. Medics, MPs, and those scientists in their clean suits were all rushing toward the ship, but they stopped at the edge of the gangway. They stopped, and they recoiled. Some of them turned away and vomited. I pushed past them. I climbed onto the main deck of the USS Eldridge. The heat was unbearable. The metal of the ship was radiating a fever, like living skin, but it was what I saw on the bulkhead that froze my blood. There were 2 sailors standing near the gun turret, or at least they looked like they were standing. But their posture was wrong. They were rigid, unnatural. I walked closer. I reached out to grab the shoulder of the first man. "Soldier," I said. "Report." He didn't answer. He didn't blink. I looked down at his legs. They weren't there. His uniform ended at the thighs. Below that, there was no blood. There was no severance. His body simply flowed into the solid steel deck. The molecules of his flesh had merged perfectly with the molecules of the ship. He was fused, welded by a force that ignored biology. He was alive. I could see the pulse in his neck. I could see his chest rising and falling. But he was no longer just a man. He was the ship. His nervous system was wired into the hydraulic lines. He was feeling the engine vibrations as if they were his own heartbeat. I heard a wail from the bridge. I ran up the ladder. Inside the wheelhouse, the helmsman was screaming. His hands were on the wheel, but he couldn't let go. His fingers had sunk into the metal steering column. The skin of his wrists had stretched and blended with the brass. He was begging us to cut his hands off. He was begging for an amputation. But the worst was the man in the mess hall. We found him buried up to his neck in the wall. Just his head was sticking out of the steel bulkhead. His eyes were wide, darting around the room in panic. He was breathing, he was crying, but his lungs, his stomach, his heart, they were all sharing space with the iron atoms of the wall. How long can a man survive when his blood is pumping through a steel plate? Longer than you think. The scientists didn't help them. They just watched. They took notes. They looked at these abominations with fascination, not pity. They called it molecular interbonding. I called it hell. Those who merged with the ship were the unlucky ones. They died quickly, or they were euthanized by the medical teams to stop the screaming. But there was another group, the survivors, the ones who looked fine, the ones who walked off the ship on their own 2 legs. We thought they were safe. We were wrong. We called it the freeze. It started in the infirmary. I was sitting next to a kid named Kowalski. He was 19. He was shaking, smoking a cigarette, telling me about the green fog. He said the fog was alive. He said it whispered to him. Then mid-sentence, he stopped. He didn't just stop talking. He stopped existing in our time. His mouth was open. The smoke from his cigarette hung in the air, perfectly still, like a photograph. His eyes didn't blink. I waved my hand in front of his face. Nothing. I touched his arm. It was cold, not dead cold. Absolute zero cold. It felt like touching a statue made of dry ice. I yelled for a medic. The doctor came over, took one look, and whispered, "Lay hands on him. Now." Two other sailors rushed over. They grabbed Kowalski's shoulders. They shook him. They rubbed his arms. And suddenly, snap. Kowalski gasped, sucking in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. The smoke from his cigarette started moving again. He looked around, terrified. "Why are you looking at me, Mom?" he asked. "I was just talking." To him, no time had passed. To us, he had been gone for 10 minutes. The doctor explained it later, in hushed tones. He said the men were unstuck. The experiment had loosened their grip on the present moment. If they stood still for too long, they would slip out of the time stream. They would get stuck in the seconds between the seconds. And if we didn't touch them, if we didn't use the bioelectric energy of another human being to anchor them back to this reality, they would fade. I saw it happen. A week later, in a bar near the Navy Yard, a fight broke out. Two of the Eldridge survivors were there. One of them got punched. He stumbled back against the wall, and then he froze. The bar went silent. We all knew the drill. "Get him!" someone shouted. "Ground him!" But we were too slow. Before anyone could touch him, he began to turn transparent. First his uniform, then his skin, then his bones. He looked at us with eyes that were fading into mist. He opened his mouth to scream, but only silence came out. And then he was gone. No body, no ash. Just an empty space where a man used to be. The Navy says he deserted. They marked him as AWOL. But I know where he is. He's still in that bar. He's still standing against that wall. He's just trapped in a moment that passed 50 years ago. Screaming for help that will never arrive. They told us to forget. They told us it never happened. But how do you forget a man who disappears right in front of your eyes? How do you forget the smell of burning ozone? You don't. You just wait for the fog to come for you too. You might be asking yourself, if all of this happened, why isn't it on the news? Why isn't it in the history books? Because the United States Navy knows how to clean up a mess. They towed the USS Eldridge into a dry dock before the sun came up. They draped huge canvas tarps over the hull so no one could see the distortions in the metal. As for us, the witnesses, they rounded us up. They took the crew of the Furuseth and the survivors of the Eldridge to a secure facility. I was kept in a room with no windows for 3 weeks. Men in gray suits came in every day. They didn't ask questions. They gave statements. They told me what I saw. "You saw a magnetic mine defense test," they said. "You saw a discharge of static electricity," they said. "The screaming was due to panic, not pain," they both said. They made us sign papers. Thick stacks of legal documents that said if we ever spoke a word of this, we would be tried for treason. We would be buried in a prison so deep that sunlight would be a memory. Most of the men signed. They wanted to go home. They wanted to forget the smell of ozone. But I couldn't sign because I knew that ink on paper couldn't stop what was coming. Morris Jessup, the man I sent my letters to, he tried to investigate. He tried to use science to prove what I saw, and they found him in his car in Florida. A hose connected from the exhaust pipe to the window. Ruled a suicide, but I know the truth. Jessup didn't kill himself. He was erased, just like the sailors on that deck. I have spent my life running, moving from motel to motel, changing my name, looking over my shoulder. Sometimes, late at night, I can still feel the vibration in the floorboards. I can still taste the copper in my mouth. The Eldridge was decommissioned. They say they sold it for scrap to Greece. They say it was melted down into razor blades and cars. But metal has a memory. If you are driving a car made of recycled steel and the radio suddenly starts playing static, or the doors lock by themselves, don't be surprised. You might be driving a piece of the ship, and it might be trying to take you back to 1943. My name is Carlos Allende. I am tired of running. I am tired of the Fahabatma. I am leaving this tape here. If you find it, don't look for me. I am already gone. Carlos Allende died in 1994. The official cause was heart failure. He died in a small room claiming that the walls were breathing. To this day, the Philadelphia experiment remains the most controversial military legend in American history. The Navy denies it. Physicists say it is impossible. Skeptics say it was the ramblings of a madman. But here's the thing about legends. They don't need permission to be true. We know that Einstein was working on unified field theory. We know the Navy was desperate to hide their ships from Nazi U-boats. And we know that during war, ethics are often the first casualty. Maybe they didn't mean to open a door to another dimension. Maybe they just wanted to bend light. But when you pull on the fabric of reality, you never know what is going to unravel. There is a theory in quantum physics that says time is not a straight line. It is a loop. If the USS Eldridge really did punch a hole in space-time, that hole might still be open. Drifting, invisible, moving through our world like a storm front. So tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to do one thing. Look in the mirror. Look at your reflection. Does it blink at the exact same time you do? Or is there a delay, a tiny microsecond lag? If you see a delay, don't panic, don't scream, just step away from the mirror. Because if your reflection isn't moving with you, it means you are already stuck, and the fog is coming. I am Captain Nightwhisper. Stay solid, stay in the light, and never, ever trust the silence. Good night. End of transmission. You made it through the archives. You know what is out there now. If you are still awake, congratulations. You are part of the resistance. Rest up, soldier. New files are being decrypted as we speak. Captain out.